Michael's life came to an abrupt end in a dark room, illuminated only by the glow of his computer screen. Clutching his chest, he felt death closing in. Surprisingly, he wasn't afraid. After spending 35 years enjoying games, anime, and delivery food, he considered his life satisfying enough. As his vision faded into darkness, he accepted the end without regret. Yet, instead of disappearing, Michael remained conscious. He couldn't move, see, or feel anything, but his thoughts continued. Wondering if this was the afterlife, he was startled when an ethereal voice suddenly spoke his name. The mysterious being introduced itself as a god and immediately apologized. According to the god, Michael's death had been a mistake. He wasn't supposed to have died so early. Rather than reacting with anger, Michael calmly accepted the situation. He reasoned that if the god could simply revive him, there would be no need for this conversation in the first place. His indifference left the god baffled. The deity had expected outrage, questions, or demands for answers, but Michael showed none of that. When asked why he wasn't angry, Michael simply explained that there was no point worrying about something he couldn't change. The god seemed even more frustrated by this response. He had prepared himself to deal with an emotional human, not someone who accepted everything so casually. Trying to make up for the mistake, the god offered Michael a new life in another world. To his surprise, Michael remained unimpressed. While he loved anime and fantasy stories, he preferred watching heroes go on adventures rather than becoming one himself. In his previous life, everything he needed was easily available. Food could be delivered to his door, entertainment was only a few clicks away, and survival was never a struggle. Starting over in a fantasy world sounded more exhausting than exciting. Michael even suggested that the god simply take his soul and let him disappear. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option. The god explained that there were rules he had to follow, and Michael's soul had to be reincarnated into another world. Even then, Michael accepted the situation without resistance. His calm reaction nearly drove the god crazy. After only a few minutes of dealing with him, the deity finally gave up and sent his soul away. A warm sensation surrounded Michael, as though he had been submerged in a comforting sea. As he drifted away, he heard the god's final words. The god revealed that he had granted Michael abilities based on his deepest desires, though their nature would remain unknown for now. As additional compensation, Michael would be reborn as the youngest son of the richest family in the entire world, allowing him to live in luxury despite being forced into a new life. Soon after, Michael heard strange, muffled sounds and felt himself being pulled from somewhere warm and cramped. A blinding light filled his vision. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he had been born into a completely new world. The unfamiliar voices around him spoke a language he couldn't understand. Then, a voice suddenly answered the question forming in his mind. It explained that the people around him were celebrating his birth. Startled, Michael immediately asked who was speaking. The response came instantly. "I am ChatJK1, your personal AI assistant." Michael's first moments in his new life immediately worried everyone around him. Instead of crying like a normal newborn, he simply stared at his surroundings with a confused expression. His mother panicked, asking if something was wrong with her baby, while the doctor examined him carefully. The doctor suddenly activated a strange ability. A faint green glow covered his body, and a mirage of vines and leaves appeared across his face. After inspecting the child, he admitted that he was confused. As far as he could tell, there was nothing physically wrong with the baby. While his parents continued worrying, Michael focused on understanding his situation. He observed the people around him. The man holding him was obviously the doctor who had delivered him. His mother lay exhausted on the bed, her long golden hair spread across the pillow after giving birth. She looked completely human, which relieved Michael somewhat. At least, the god had sent him somewhere that still resembled his old world. His father stood beside her, dressed in a dignified uniform that looked more fitting for a prince or decorated military officer than a modern parent. Together, they looked as if they had stepped straight out of a medieval painting. Looking around the room, Michael became increasingly confused. Nothing resembled a hospital. He questioned ChatJK1, who informed him that this was now his home. That answer only raised more questions. If he had been reborn into the richest family in the world, why was he born at home? Where were the machines, monitors, and medical equipment he expected to see? Before he could think further, the doctor glowed with green light again. ChatJK1 immediately identified it as examining magic. The revelation caught Michael's attention. Magic actually existed in this world. When ChatJK1 offered to explain it, Michael agreed. Instantly, information appeared in his vision, like a game system. The spell was called Medical Eyes, a 3-star earth and light elemental spell that allowed its user to look inside a body and detect disease diseases or abnormalities. Seeing information displayed directly before his eyes made Michael wonder whether he had received an ability similar to the protagonists from fantasy stories who could copy skills and powers. If that were true, this reincarnation might not be so bad after all. Magic offered countless conveniences. Combined with being born into the wealthiest family in the world, Michael imagined a comfortable future. He could simply hire people to do everything for him and enjoy an easy life. ChatJK1 pointed out that his parents would likely hire tutors to teach him administrative duties, but Michael ignored the suggestion. As far as he was concerned, a personal AI assistant could handle all the difficult work. Then another realization hit him. Where were the televisions, the air conditioners, the electric lights? As he examined the room more carefully, he found only candles and oil lamps. The truth finally became impossible to ignore. The home berth, the clothing, the room itself, and the complete absence of modern technology all pointed to the same conclusion. He had been reincarnated into a medieval world. Even if he belonged to the richest family alive, their standard of living was still primitive compared to ordinary people from his previous life. Then he noticed an unpleasant smell. ChatJK1 calmly informed him that it came from feces. Horrified, Michael immediately thought about toilets. ChatJK1 confirmed that there was a high probability this world did not even have plumbing. That realization finally broke him. Michael screamed in absolute despair at the nightmare he had been reborn into. To everyone else in the room, however, it simply sounded like a healthy newborn finally crying for the first time. Relieved, his parents and the doctor smiled. Their baby boy was perfectly healthy after all. Several days passed after Michael's birth, and his new life quickly became painfully boring. Unable to move around on his own, he spent nearly all his time lying in a crib. Unlike the reincarnation stories he used to watch and read, there was no convenient time skip. He was forced to experience every slow moment of infancy firsthand. His only source of entertainment was a set of spinning birds hanging above his crib, which did little to ease his boredom. One day, his mother entered the room and spoke to him. To Michael's surprise, he suddenly understood her words perfectly. ChatJK1 explained that it had gathered enough information from listening to conversations around the mansion and had successfully translated the local language directly into something Michael could understand. The AI had accomplished this on its own, making Michael appreciate just how useful his personal assistant truly was. During the conversation, he learned that his name in this world was also Michael. His mother proudly showed him off to a maid and repeatedly called him adorable. She even pinched his cheeks, causing him discomfort, though he didn't hold it against her. Since his birth, she had personally cared for him, despite having plenty of servants who could have handled the responsibility. Soon, she picked him up and sat cross-legged on the floor. While holding him on her lap, she talked about teaching him magic herself when he grew older, instead of hiring tutors like his father wanted. Then her expression became serious, and she began meditating. Almost immediately, Michael noticed countless tiny green particles appear throughout the room. They slowly drifted around her body before sinking into her skin. Curious, he asked ChatJK1 what he was seeing. The AI identified the particles as earth element mana and explained that his mother was gathering and storing them inside her body. The sight fascinated Michael. Since arriving in this world, nothing had captured his attention more than witnessing magic firsthand. He watched closely as his mother spent an entire hour gathering mana before finally stopping and leaving him alone in the nursery. Even after she left, Michael couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. When he asked whether he could learn the same technique, ChatJK1 immediately analyzed it and obtained the theory behind mana gathering. The AI then offered to teach him. Michael accepted without hesitation. A massive amount of information suddenly flowed into his mind. Instinctively, he closed his eyes and began meditating exactly as his mother had done. Soon, he sensed colorful particles filling the room. Green, blue, red, and silver mana floated around him, representing the four basic elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Following his newfound instincts, Michael created a pulling force within his body that drew every nearby mana particle toward him. The elemental energy flowed into his skin before gathering inside his abdomen. As the mana accumulated, 4 tiny colored stones formed within him. Each stone automatically absorbed its matching element and slowly grew larger. Realizing what this meant, Michael asked if he could use all 4 elemental affinities. ChatJK1 confirmed that he could. It also suggested that other elements might exist in the world and that Michael could potentially be compatible with those as well. The discovery left him satisfied. The god had apparently given him an extraordinary talent. However, However, gathering mana proved exhausting. After only a short period, Michael felt completely drained. Before falling asleep, ChatJK-1 activated automatic mana gathering on his behalf. As Michael slept peacefully in his crib, elemental particles continued flowing into his body. Later, when his mother returned, she noticed that the room contained fewer earth element particles than before. Assuming it was nothing more than coincidence, she paid little attention to it, completely unaware that her newborn son had absorbed them himself. Over the following months, Michael settled into the routine of baby life. Most of his days consisted of sleeping, lying in his crib, and enduring the boredom that came with being trapped in an infant's body. The one thing keeping him occupied was mana gathering. Every day, he absorbed elemental mana from his surroundings and strengthened the 4 elemental stones that had formed inside his body. As those stones grew, his sensitivity to mana improved dramatically. He could now sense not only how much mana existed around him, but also identify the different elemental types mixed within the air. The benefits extended beyond magic. Constantly gathering mana seemed to strengthen his physical body as well. Despite still being a baby, he was already close to being able to stand on his own. Unfortunately, he rarely had time alone to practice. His mother constantly carried him around, and the mansion's maids seemed completely obsessed with him. They regularly showed him around the estate, pinched his cheeks, and showered him with affection. According to Michael, the god had apparently blessed him with both handsome and cute features, which only made the attention worse. As the months passed, he also learned more about his family. Because his mother insisted that he call her mommy and his father spent most of his time away from home, it actually took him quite a while to learn their real names. By listening to servant gossip, he discovered that his mother was named Lilia, while his father was Bart. His own full name was Michael Von Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilt family was supposedly the richest and most influential family in the entire world. Michael hadn't seen enough of the outside world to verify that claim, but he remained hopeful that his future inheritance would eventually allow him to recreate some of the comforts of modern life. Before long, Michael reached his first birthday. For Lilia, this was an event worthy of a grand celebration. She ordered the construction of a special venue near the family estate. Michael initially expected something modest, but what he saw completely shattered his expectations. The venue was so massive that traveling across it required a carriage. It was comparable in size to a football stadium. What shocked him even more was that Lilia considered it too small. She apologized to him and promised to build an even larger venue for his next birthday, explaining that there simply hadn't been enough time to prepare something grander. Watching the construction process gave Michael his first real glimpse into the family's wealth. Since there were no machines in this world, everything had been built by hand. Tens of thousands of workers and mages labored daily to complete the enormous project. For Michael, however, the most valuable part wasn't the venue itself. It was the magic. As he observed the mages working, he carefully watched how they manipulated elemental mana to cast spells. Thanks to his heightened mana sensitivity and ChatJK-1's analysis abilities, he continuously acquired the theories behind the magic being used. By studying them, he learned exactly how mana flowed through the body before transforming into spells. Back in his crib, Michael immediately began testing his new knowledge. The powerful spells he had observed required far more mana than he currently possessed, making them impossible to use. However, he discovered 4 basic 1-star spells that were within reach: Water Ball, Ember, Rock Throw, and Wind Blow. Concentrating carefully, he guided mana from his abdomen into his hands. A small sphere of water appeared above one hand. Next came a tiny floating rock. Then, a candle-sized flame formed at his fingertip. With all 3 elemental manifestations hovering in front of him, Michael cast Wind Blow. A gust of wind launched the water ball, rock, and flame across the room. A sharp impact echoed as they struck the wall. For the first time since arriving in this world, Michael had successfully cast magic with his own hands, even while still a 1-year-old baby. Michael's first birthday finally arrived, but the months leading up to it passed quickly because of an unexpected incident caused by his own magic. After secretly casting several spells in his crib, small burn marks and water stains appeared on the wall. The damage was minor, but the discovery immediately alarmed the entire household. Investigators examined the scene and confirmed that magic had been used inside the young master's room. To Michael, it seemed insignificant. To his mother, it looked like an attempted assassination. The mansion's security was dramatically increased. More maids were assigned to watch over him, guards were added, and Michael was even moved into his mother's room temporarily. As the investigation continued, the situation became even stranger. Experts determined that the traces belonged to multiple elemental spells cast at the exact same time by a single person. That revelation shocked everyone. Michael soon learned that possessing multiple elemental affinities was extraordinarily rare. 2 elements marked someone as a genius. 3 elements represented a talent beyond ordinary understanding. 4 elements, however, belonged only in legends. Nobody could explain how a legendary talent had somehow entered the Vanderbilt estate and cast several harmless 1-star spells inside a baby's room. Realizing how unusual his abilities truly were, Michael decided to be far more careful moving forward. Revealing that he was the one responsible would create problems he had no interest in dealing with. Eventually, the investigation ended without answers. Since nobody was harmed and nothing was stolen, authorities dismissed the event as some strange, natural occurrence. His mother immediately adopted a different interpretation. Convinced that her son had been blessed by God, she began proudly sharing the story with everyone she met. Michael found the sudden change amusing. One moment, she had been terrified, and the next, she was boasting about his supposed divine blessing. ChatJK1 pointed out that she wasn't entirely wrong. Still, Michael had no intention of explaining the truth. That became painfully obvious during his birthday celebration. Lilia personally greeted countless influential guests and repeatedly introduced Michael to them, praising him at every opportunity. She seemed determined to tell everyone how special her son was. Fortunately, Bart occasionally stepped in and interrupted her. Meanwhile, Michael sat quietly in his stroller, wishing he could simply leave. Since he had to continue acting like an ordinary child, he endured the celebration while secretly gathering small amounts of mana, careful not to attract attention. As he drifted toward sleep, he overheard an interesting conversation. One of the guests complimented the Vanderbilt family on Michael's appearance. The discussion eventually shifted toward family alliances when the guest mentioned that his own daughter had recently been born and suggested arranging something beneficial for both families. The conversation lingered in Michael's mind as time continued to pass. Before long, 5 years had gone by. Standing before a mirror, Michael saw a handsome young boy with his mother's golden hair and his father's sharp features. His magical growth during those years had been extraordinary. With a simple spell, he created a massive sphere of water larger than his own head. The amount of mana he possessed now rivaled what he had previously seen adult mages use. His control had also improved significantly. He could reshape water freely, stretching and manipulating it however he wished. Yet, despite his power, daily life remained inconvenient. One of his maids, Beretta, still had to carry multiple buckets of water from a well just to fill his bathtub whenever he wanted to bathe. Watching her perform the same tedious task reminded Michael of everything he missed from modern life. Faucets, plumbing, and running water had once been things he took for granted. Frustrated, he wished he knew how such inventions worked. To his surprise, ChatJK1 immediately offered help. The AI downloaded the necessary knowledge directly into his mind, giving him a complete understanding of how faucets functioned. As the information settled into place, Michael realized something incredible. For the first time since arriving in this world, he possessed enough knowledge to recreate a piece of modern technology himself. And ChatJK1 was already offering detailed instructions on how to build it. A flood of information suddenly poured into Michael's mind. Detailed diagrams, blueprints, and mechanical knowledge appeared so clearly that it felt as if he had known them his entire life. With ChatJK1's explanation of plumbing systems and faucets, he now understood exactly how to build one. The realization filled him with excitement. For the first time since arriving in this medieval world, he could see a path toward bringing back one of the conveniences he missed most. His reaction caught Beretta's attention. She entered the bathroom and found him celebrating by himself. Michael quickly tried to hide his excitement, brushing it off as nothing. Beretta simply smiled and continued helping him prepare for his bath. As she carried bucket after bucket of water into the room, Michael focused on planning his future plumbing project. The bathtub required several trips to the well before it could be filled, and although Beretta never complained, Michael noticed how exhausted she looked once she finally left the room. Outside, another maid expressed concern about her condition. She pointed out that the mansion employed water mages who could fill the bathtub instantly. Beretta refused the suggestion. The young master preferred warmer water, and the water created by the mages was too cold. Despite the strain on her body, she insisted on doing the work herself because she genuinely cared for Michael. After finishing his bath, Michael headed directly to the mansion library. The Vanderbilt family's wealth was immediately obvious. Yes, the library was so vast that it could have been considered a mansion by itself in his previous world. Shelves filled with books from across the world stretched in every direction. Michael wandered through the enormous collection, searching for one specific thing. Before building a plumbing system, he needed to determine whether installing it throughout the mansion was even possible. To do that, he needed detailed blueprints of the estate. Eventually, he found a book labeled Bart Vanderbilt Mansion sitting on a high shelf. After climbing a ladder to retrieve it, he sat down and began flipping through its pages. The text was written in the local language, but that didn't matter. ChatJK-1 handled the difficult part. Michael asked the AI to determine the optimal placement for a plumbing system. As he casually turned pages, ChatJK-1 analyzed the entire mansion layout. Moments later, the answer arrived. Another stream of information entered Michael's mind, revealing the estate's internal structure in incredible detail. ChatJK-1 even displayed a mental hologram showing the mansion with a completed plumbing network already installed. Now, Michael knew exactly where everything needed to go. The required materials were also surprisingly straightforward. The pipes needed to be made from copper, which was readily available in this world. Creating the pipes wouldn't be difficult either. Over the years, Michael had accumulated numerous production-related spells simply by observing mages at work. Thanks to his constant mana training, he could already cast 2-star spells despite being only 5 years old. 2 particular spells were exactly what he needed: Metal Bend and Metal Fuse. With those abilities, manufacturing the pipes himself was entirely possible. After finalizing his plans, Michael left the library with a determined expression. There was only one obstacle left. He needed money to acquire the materials. That meant obtaining permission from the one person who controlled the household's resources. Marching through the mansion as if preparing for battle, Michael stopped outside his mother's room and knocked on the door. Lilia welcomed him inside with a smile. Michael immediately explained that he needed to buy something. His mother, however, wanted a reason. After a brief struggle, Michael reluctantly offered a trade. In exchange for funding his purchase, she would be allowed to pinch his cheeks 5 times. Lilia accepted instantly. The negotiation ended successfully. By the end of the day, Michael had secured the resources needed to begin his plumbing project. Unfortunately, he also ended up with a pair of swollen red cheeks. Michael soon received a massive shipment of materials from the Vanderbilt family's warehouses. Thanks to the family's extensive businesses, obtaining the metals he needed was easy. The real challenge was finding a place where he could work without anyone interfering. Fortunately, the Vanderbilt estate sat in the middle of a vast forest surrounded by mountains and hills. With so much empty land and no dangerous animals nearby, Michael decided to establish a secret workshop outside the mansion. Using his enhanced physical abilities and the 1-star spell Air Jump, he slipped away from the estate unnoticed. He then asked ChatJK-1 to locate a suitable location for his project. After scanning the area, the AI guided him deeper into the forest and led him to the base of a small mountain. There, Michael immediately saw the potential. He decided to carve out his own hidden workspace. Using the 1-star spell Boulder Crush, he began digging into the mountainside. The process was slow. Each cast only removed a small amount of stone, but Michael remained persistent. Days passed as he continued expanding the space. The project served 2 purposes. It gave him a private area to conduct experiments, and it allowed him to train his magic continuously. After nearly 20 days of work, he finally completed what he called the project room. The hidden chamber measured roughly 20 meters by 20 meters, with a 5-meter ceiling. It was large enough to serve as a proper workshop. He even created metal tables, chairs, and desks using the 2-star spell Metal Bend, further improving his control over metal manipulation. With his secret base complete, Michael was finally ready to begin building his plumbing system. Soon afterward, strange noises began echoing throughout the mansion. Hammering sounds and vibrations spread through the entire estate, alarming the servants. The maids could hear the impacts even from the kitchen. When they asked what was happening, Beretta explained that the young master was working on a secret project and had instructed everyone not to disturb him. That explanation did little to reassure them. Since Bart and Lilia were away for an entire month, the servants became increasingly nervous. The sounds made it seem as though Michael was tearing apart the mansion itself. Then, without warning, the noise stopped. A few minutes later, Michael casually walked into the kitchen covered in dust and debris. While the stunned maids stared at him, he poured himself a drink, joked about working hard, and then returned upstairs to continue his mysterious project. The servants could only watch in confusion. Several more days passed before Michael finally reached reached the moment he had been waiting for. Inside his bathroom stood a simple faucet attached to the wall. Beneath it sat a basin connected to a network of pipes hidden beneath the floor. Everything was ready. Michael turned the lever. For a moment, only a faint gurgling echoed through the pipes. Then a few drops of water emerged. The drops became a trickle. The trickle became a steady stream. Water flowed continuously from the faucet. Michael immediately celebrated his success. After nearly a month of planning and construction, he had recreated running water in a world that lacked plumbing. To make it work, he had built a large water tank above the mansion and used gravity and air pressure to move water through the pipes. Installing the system required breaking walls and floors throughout parts of the house, leaving sections of the mansion looking badly damaged. To Michael, none of that mattered. This invention brought him one step closer to the comfortable lifestyle he remembered from his previous world. At that moment, Beretta entered the room, intending to confront him about all the noise and destruction. Her complaints vanished the moment she saw the faucet. Water continued flowing from it without any visible magic. Completely stunned, she asked what it was. Michael casually explained that it was called a faucet and invited her to try it. Still confused, Beretta stepped closer. Michael then splashed her with some of the water. The warmth immediately caught her attention. This wasn't magically created water. It was ordinary water drawn directly from the well. Realizing that fact left her utterly speechless. News of Michael's strange new invention spread quickly among the mansion staff. Before long, his bathroom was packed with maids, all staring in amazement at the faucet and the stream of water continuously flowing from it. None of them could understand how it worked. Some wondered if magic was involved. Others speculated that someone might be secretly forcing water through the pipes from behind the wall. The sight of water appearing without a mage casting a spell seemed completely impossible to them. Beretta eventually turned to Michael and asked the question everyone wanted answered. Did he really make this himself? When Michael confirmed it, the entire room erupted with curiosity. Using the knowledge ChatJK1 had given him, he explained the basics of gravity, water pressure, and connected pipes. To him, it was a simple concept, but to the maids, it sounded revolutionary. The more they listened, the more shocked they became. What impressed them most was not only the invention itself, but also the fact that a 5-year-old child could explain it so confidently. They quickly began praising him, calling him a genius, and insisting that Lilia needed to hear about his accomplishment immediately. Michael stopped them. He asked the maids not to tell his mother until she returned from her trip. As long as his parents were away, he could work freely on his projects without interference. He preferred to keep things that way for now. Before the conversation could continue, one of the maids noticed another unusual object in the bathroom. Unlike the faucet, this one was built into the floor. It was a large bowl connected to the plumbing system and partially filled with water. When asked about it, Michael casually revealed its purpose. It was a toilet. The invention was actually the main reason he had built the plumbing system in the first place. For 5 years, he had been forced to use bushes or chamber pots like everyone else in this world. While the locals considered such things normal, Michael had spent his previous life surrounded by modern sanitation and had never grown accustomed to the smell. The toilet was his solution. Since he had not yet developed a proper filtration system, the waste would simply travel through pipes and be carried away to a nearby river. It was only a temporary setup, but it was enough for now. The maids still had no idea how the device worked. To demonstrate, Michael pressed a button attached to the toilet tank. Instantly, water rushed through the bowl with a loud flushing sound. The sudden roar startled everyone. Several maids nearly jumped in fright, convinced some kind of creature was hidden beneath the floor. Laughing, Michael explained that the toilet was used for relieving oneself. Once finished, all a person had to do was press the button, allowing the water to carry everything away. Afterward, they could wash their hands at the faucet. The maids immediately realized the value of such a system. As household servants, they were responsible for cleaning chamber pots and disposing of waste manually. They also had to spend significant effort cleaning filthy latrines. The toilet eliminated nearly all of that work. Not only would it save time and labor, but it would also drastically reduce the unpleasant smells that filled parts of the estate. The realization left them stunned. They called the invention a miracle and praised Michael repeatedly. Some even became so fascinated with the running water that they started splashing each other playfully, like children discovering a new toy. Michael couldn't help laughing along with them. Eventually, Beretta stepped in and restored order. Reminding everyone that they were still inside the young master's personal bathroom, she chased the maids out before threatening to tell Lilia about their behavior. Terrified by that possibility, the maids immediately scattered. With the room finally empty again, Michael was left alone to enjoy the success masterclass of the plumbing system he had spent so long creating. The morning after completing his plumbing system, Beretta was abruptly awakened by the sound of excited screams echoing throughout the mansion. Fearing that something terrible had happened, she rushed outside the maid dormitory. To her surprise, the mansion's atrium was completely empty. The maids who should have been busy with their morning chores were nowhere to be seen. Following the noise, she eventually arrived at the kitchen house. There, she found nearly every maid crowded around something on the wall. When they noticed her arrival, they eagerly stepped aside to reveal the source of their excitement. Installed beside the cabinets was a row of sinks connected to multiple faucets. The maids excitedly explained that Michael must have installed them during the night. Instead of carrying water from the well whenever they needed to wash dishes, they could now simply turn a lever and receive a continuous flow of water. Beretta tested one herself and watched as clean water poured into the basin below. Before she could fully process it, the younger maids dragged her toward the communal latrine. The difference became obvious before they even entered. The usual smell was almost completely gone. Inside, the entire room had been transformed. Faucets lined one wall, while a drainage system carried dirty water away through newly installed pipes. On the opposite side stood several toilets connected to the same plumbing network. The maids proudly explained that they had already tested them, and everything worked exactly as Michael had described. The new system changed everything. Their daily workload had been drastically reduced, and maintaining cleanliness had become far easier than before. Tasks that once required constant trips to the well and unpleasant manual labor could now be handled with little effort. As the maids continued celebrating, Michael suddenly appeared behind them with a smile and asked if they liked his work. The response was immediate. The maids rushed toward him, hugging him from every direction while showering him with gratitude and praise. Some declared that they would happily serve him forever, while others thanked him for giving them something so valuable. Although his face was nearly crushed by the affection, Michael didn't seem to mind. Seeing their excitement only reinforced how primitive everyday life in this world really was. At that moment, he silently resolved to keep improving life for both himself and the people around him. After escaping the group, Michael approached Beretta and told her he wanted to show her something. Curious, she followed him along with the other maids. Their destination turned out to be the maid dormitory, specifically Beretta's personal washroom. The room was simple and contained little more than a bucket and dipper for bathing. However, once Michael opened the door, everyone immediately noticed a new fixture attached to the wall. Unlike the faucets they had already seen, this pipe ended in a wide metal head filled with tiny holes. Michael introduced it as a shower. When he turned the lever, warm water poured from above like a miniature waterfall. Beretta stepped forward and cautiously reached into the stream. The water was warm and natural. It wasn't the cold water produced by magic. Then Michael revealed why he had made it. He explained that she no longer needed to haul heavy buckets from the well or continue straining her back. The statement stunned everyone. The maids had assumed Michael never noticed Beretta's condition, yet he had clearly been paying attention all along. When Beretta asked if that was the reason he built the shower, Michael quickly denied it and awkwardly insisted that he simply wanted one for himself as well. His reaction only made the younger maids smile. They praised him for being both intelligent and thoughtful, teasing him for how sweet he was. Beretta, however, felt her eyes grow moist. Despite being only a servant, she realized that the young master genuinely cared about her well-being, and that realization made her even more grateful to serve him. As the days passed, Michael's inventions spread throughout the Vanderbilt estate. Employees who had been away from the mansion returned to a strange sight. The maids seemed obsessed with spending time in the kitchen and communal bathrooms, washing themselves far more often than before. The butlers quickly discovered the reason. Michael had installed showers, toilets, and running water systems, not only for the maids, but throughout their living quarters as well. Seeing the plumbing system for the first time left them just as stunned as the maids had been. Some of the butlers were skilled handymen and immediately recognized how difficult it would have been to create such a network of pipes. Others noticed signs that magic had been used in the construction. That realization only raised more questions. The plumbing clearly showed evidence of advanced magical craftsmanship, but Michael was only 5 years old. By all logic, he should have only recently begun learning magic, not using it to create a complex plumbing system. Although none of them dared question the young master directly, many secretly viewed him as a monstrous genius. Michael noticed their reactions. He knew it would only be a matter of time before people figured out that he could cast spells. Fortunately, his parents were still still away, giving him more freedom to operate without scrutiny. To ensure the butlers remained on his side, Michael installed showers and toilets in their dormitory as well. The strategy worked perfectly. Before long, the butlers were just as captivated by the comfort of running water as everyone else. They even stopped teasing the maids about constantly washing themselves and began showering twice a day as well. Maintaining the system required some effort, but it was still far more convenient than hauling water manually. Michael had installed 6 hand-operated pumps connected to an underground water source. With only a few minutes of work each morning, the water tank could be refilled for the entire day. More than a week after the plumbing system was completed, the atmosphere throughout the estate had noticeably changed. The workers seemed happier, more energetic, and generally more satisfied with their daily lives. One day, Michael encountered a butler carrying a deer carcass. Curious, he learned that many of the butlers and mages had recently been away hunting. They were gathering meat to prepare for the coming winter, when food shortages would become more common. As Michael looked at the butchered deer, his attention focused on the animal fat. Immediately, a new idea formed in his mind. Running water had improved hygiene, but another important piece was still missing: soap. The world already possessed primitive versions of soap, but Michael wasn't satisfied with them. He asked ChatJK-1 for instructions on producing a higher quality version similar to what existed in his previous world. The AI immediately supplied him with the necessary knowledge. Realizing that animal fat was one of the key ingredients, Michael asked the butler for some of it. The request seemed odd, but after remembering Michael's previous inventions, the butler agreed. Next, Michael approached Beretta and requested additional materials. The moment she saw the list, she became suspicious that the young master was planning another major project. Michael quickly reassured her that it wasn't anything as dramatic as the plumbing system and promised he wouldn't destroy the house again. Beretta accepted the explanation and gathered a group of maids to travel to the nearby town and purchase everything he needed. Many of the maids volunteered eagerly. After witnessing the impact of his previous inventions, they secretly hoped to be among the first people to see whatever Michael created next. When they returned, Michael immediately checked the supplies. Among them were essential oils and, most importantly, large quantities of lye. With all the materials prepared, he headed to his secret project room in the forest. Following ChatJK-1's instructions, he mixed animal fat and lye together to create a soap mixture. He poured it into molds and used the one-star spell Ember to speed up the curing process. The next morning, Michael rushed back to the workshop. There, waiting inside the molds, was the result of his newest project. He had successfully created soap. Michael headed to the kitchen house, where the maids were busy preparing meals over open fires. As soon as they saw him, they greeted him enthusiastically and even offered him his favorite beef stew. Beretta quickly noticed something suspicious. Michael had the same mischievous smile he wore before revealing the faucet, and he was clearly hiding something behind his back. When Michael mentioned that he wanted feedback on a new project, every maid immediately stopped what they were doing and gathered around him. Curious about his latest invention, they eagerly asked what he had made this time. With a grin, Michael finally revealed a white bar he had been hiding. It was soap. The moment he presented it, the maids noticed a pleasant floral scent coming from the bar. Michael explained that it was used for cleaning the hands, body, and other parts of the body. To demonstrate, he walked to a faucet and washed his hands. After rubbing the soap, a thick lather quickly covered them. Once he rinsed it away, the maids immediately noticed the lingering fragrance left behind. One curious maid grabbed his hand and smelled it for herself. She was instantly amazed. The scent remained even after washing, and it smelled better than many perfumes and colognes they were familiar with. Michael then allowed everyone to try the soap themselves. The maids practically fought over who would use it first. Once they finally got their turns, the results spoke for themselves. One maid pointed out that dirt and coal stains that normally took several minutes of scrubbing disappeared almost immediately. Not only were her hands clean, but they also smelled wonderful afterward. Satisfied by their reactions, Michael revealed that he had prepared gifts for all of them. He brought out a large rucksack and handed each maid a bar of soap along with a small vial filled with a strange blue liquid. The soap alone caused excitement, but the mysterious liquid quickly attracted attention as well. Michael introduced it as shampoo and instructed them to use it while showering. After smelling the fragrant liquid, the maids immediately became eager to try it. Within moments, a competition broke out over who would get access to the showers first. Arguments erupted erupted throughout the kitchen house as many of them rushed back to the dormitories to test the new products. The remaining maids continued working while waiting for their turn. Eventually, the first group returned. The difference was immediately noticeable. Their bodies carried a pleasant floral fragrance, their skin looked cleaner and smoother, and their hair appeared healthier than before. The shampoo left their hair silky, soft, and free of many of the tangles that had previously been common. The transformation was so obvious that the remaining maids abandoned their work and hurried off to try the products themselves. Meanwhile, the refreshed maids continued showering Michael with praise. Some even joked that any woman would agree to marry him if he gave her gifts like these. Michael paid little attention to such comments. His mind was focused elsewhere. His goal wasn't romance, but improving the standard of living within the mansion and eventually beyond it. With running water, toilets, showers, soap, and shampoo now completed, he began considering his next project. The world still relied on sundials, candles, and hourglasses to measure time. Michael wanted to change that. His next objective was to create the first mechanical clock. Unlike some of his previous inventions, a clock relied entirely on gears and metal components, making it achievable with the skills he already possessed. However, success would require much greater precision. To accomplish that, he would need to further master his 2-star spell, Metal Bend. The spell allowed him to manipulate and shape metal telepathically, using fire and earth elements, with its effectiveness depending on both the material and the user's mastery. For Michael, that meant more practice, and with another invention already taking shape in his mind, his efforts soon shifted toward making the world's first mechanical clock a reality. The following day, one of the Vanderbilt maids, Castell, traveled to the nearby town of Kingsbridge. Unlike ordinary settlements, Kingsbridge catered to wealthy nobles, merchants, and influential families. It was a place where the rich gathered to enjoy luxurious lifestyles, and among its popular establishments was a high-class tea house frequented by wealthy women, their daughters, and their servants. That day, the tea gathering proceeded as usual. The women showed off expensive gifts, jewelry, and luxuries purchased by their husbands while subtly competing with one another. Beneath the polite smiles and pleasant conversation was a constant struggle to prove who lived the most extravagant life. When Castell entered the establishment, most of the noblewomen barely paid attention to her at first. As a maid, she normally wouldn't have been worth noticing. However, something immediately caught their attention. A pleasant floral fragrance drifted through the room the moment she arrived. The scent was strong enough to be noticed, but gentle enough not to overwhelm. It was unlike any perfume the women had encountered before. As Castell carried tea and biscuits to the table on behalf of Lilia, who was still away from the estate, the fragrance became even stronger. The women began looking around in confusion. They assumed someone must have applied an expensive perfume, but every person at the table denied it. Eventually, they realized the scent was coming from Castell herself. The maid remained completely unaware of the attention. Since everyone at the Vanderbilt estate now used Michael's soap and shampoo, the pleasant fragrance had become normal to her. Only when the entire table fell silent and stared at her did she realize something was wrong. One of the noblewomen finally asked what perfume she used. Castell honestly replied that she didn't wear perfume at all. The women refused to believe her. When she insisted that the scent came from the soap and shampoo she used after bathing, they became even more suspicious. At that moment, one of the younger daughters stood up and examined Castell more closely. She noticed not only the fragrance, but also the condition of her skin and hair. Her hair smelled wonderful and looked exceptionally healthy. Her skin appeared smooth and well-maintained. Soon, several women gathered around her to inspect her appearance for themselves. The more they looked, the more astonished they became. The scent seemed to come naturally from her hair and skin, rather than from any external perfume. Once everyone calmed down, they questioned Castell again. This time, they seriously considered the possibility that the soap and shampoo were responsible. When she confirmed it, the room erupted. Several women immediately offered to buy the products. Some promised to pay 1 gold coin for a single set, while others wanted multiple pieces reserved for themselves and their daughters. By the time the gathering ended, the wealthy women of Kingsbridge were practically fighting over the chance to obtain Michael's creations. Before sunset, Castell hurried back to the Vanderbilt estate and went straight to Michael's room. Excitedly, she recounted everything that had happened at the tea house. According to her, the noblewomen had been completely captivated by the soap and shampoo. She was convinced that wealthy customers would eagerly buy the products if they were sold publicly. Michael listened carefully. The response from Kingsbridge surprised him, but it also revealed a new opportunity. Until now, he had relied entirely on Vanderbilt money whenever he needed materials for his inventions. Every project required asking his mother for funds. If his soap and shampoo could truly sell for 1 gold coin each, he could start earning his own money. And with his own income, Michael would finally be able to finance future inventions without depending on his family or revealing every project he wanted to pursue. After hearing Castell's report, Michael finally gained a better understanding of the value of his products. A single gold coin was worth 1,000 silver coins, and each silver coin was worth 1,000 bronze coins. Even experienced maids like Castell and Beretta earned only 1 gold coin per month, which was considered an excellent salary. That made the demand from the wealthy women of Kingsbridge even more shocking. The ingredients needed to produce soap cost only a few hundred bronze coins, yet those women were willing to pay an entire gold coin for a single bar. The potential profit was enormous. When Michael asked whether Castell would be willing to handle deliveries if they began selling the products, she eagerly agreed. She was convinced that once the noble women started using the soap and shampoo, their reputation would spread rapidly throughout high society. Michael agreed with her assessment. The wealthy women of Kingsbridge constantly competed with one another and loved displaying luxury items. In his eyes, they were essentially the influencers of this world. To capitalize on that, he instructed Castell to purchase more ingredients along with additional flowers and oils. He wanted to create multiple varieties of soap and shampoo rather than limiting himself to a single floral scent. Motivated by the opportunity, Castell immediately left to begin preparations. Once alone, Michael shifted his attention back to another project. In his hands rested a metal gear he had shaped with metal bend. Unfortunately, it revealed a limitation in his current abilities. The smallest gear he could produce was still roughly the size of an adult's hand, making it impossible to create the wristwatches or pocket watches he originally envisioned. For now, he decided to settle for a large mechanical clock. He asked ChatJK1 to explain the workings of early mechanical clocks, and the AI immediately began transferring detailed knowledge into his mind. The information covered gears, weights, and the mechanisms required for accurate timekeeping. Unlike some of his previous projects, this one was extremely complicated. Michael spent the entire night absorbing and understanding the knowledge until it felt as natural as if he had studied engineering for years. Excited by the challenge, he struggled to sleep and instead continued gathering mana to tire himself out. Despite his focus on inventions, he had never neglected his magical training. The 4 elemental mana stones inside his body had grown to the size of small acorns, allowing him to cast 1-star spells continuously for about 10 minutes without exhaustion. Curious about his progress, he asked ChatJK1 how his mana compared to other mages. The AI couldn't answer. Because Michael had kept his abilities secret, there was no data available for comparison. He also lacked a proper understanding of magic itself. He still knew little about advanced spells, elemental affinities beyond the basic 4, or the true significance of spell rankings. That realization led him to a decision. When his parents returned, he planned to reveal that he had used magic to create the plumbing system. Doing so would give him a legitimate reason to receive magical education and hopefully gain access to a tutor. The following day, Michael began carefully crafting the first components of his clock. Since precision was critical, he worked slowly and methodically. At the same time, he organized soap and shampoo production on a larger scale. Using knowledge from his previous life, he essentially created a primitive factory. Different groups of maids handled different stages of production. Some prepared and mixed ingredients, others combined them with water, and another group poured the mixtures into molds. The maids enthusiastically embraced the work because Michael promised they could keep some soap and shampoo for themselves. When he offered to pay them, however, they immediately refused. The servants insisted that helping him was already part of their duties and reminded him how much his inventions had improved their lives. Beretta explained that accepting money would deny them the chance to show their gratitude. Although Michael was touched by their sincerity, he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. Coming from a world where work deserved compensation, he decided that if they refused payment, he would simply repay their efforts with even more inventions in the future. The days passed in a flurry of activity throughout the Vanderbilt estate. The maids and butlers completed their normal duties early each day before gathering in the backyard to help manufacture soap and shampoo. Production continued steadily as everyone worked together to prepare goods for sale. Meanwhile, Michael focused on his newest invention. Most of the difficult work had already been completed. The gears and mechanisms for his clock were finished inside his project room, leaving only the final adjustments before before assembly. After 2 more days of work, the project was finally complete. The finished clock resembled a crude version of Big Ben. It stood as tall as a cabinet and featured a simple circular face with thin metal rods serving as the hour and minute hands. From the outside, it looked decent enough. The inside, however, was another story. The gears, pulleys, and ropes were packed together without much elegance. Michael knew it was far from perfect craftsmanship, but as long as the mechanism functioned properly, he was satisfied. Unlike modern clocks, this one had no independent power source. Instead, it relied on weights and required daily winding through a crank attached to its side. Standing beside the clock, Michael began turning the crank. Eventually, a satisfying ding echoed from the mechanism as resistance increased, signaling that it was fully wound. Then came the moment of truth. He released the crank. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The rhythmic sound echoed through the room as the hands began moving. It worked. Relief and satisfaction washed over Michael as he watched the clock function exactly as intended. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't alone. A crowd of maids and butlers had already gathered behind him, drawn by the strange ticking sound. Curious about the invention, they eagerly asked for an explanation. Michael launched into a lengthy lecture about hours, minutes, and timekeeping. Most of it went over their heads. Having never seen a clock before, they struggled to grasp the concept. Only when he compared the movement of the clock's hands to the burning time of candles did they finally begin to understand. The servants were impressed, but they still didn't realize how useful the invention truly was. That changed when Michael announced a new rule. From now on, no one in the mansion would work more than 8 hours per day. The reaction was immediate confusion. The workers couldn't understand why he would limit their hours when working longer would produce more soap and generate more profit. Some even worried that shorter working hours meant they might lose their jobs. Michael explained that people shouldn't spend every waking moment working. In his previous life, he had learned that endless labor was harmful. People needed time for themselves and deserved a proper balance between work and life. The servants listened quietly. Then, Michael offered a much simpler explanation. If he were in their position, he wouldn't want to spend every hour of the day working. The innocent sincerity of those words touched everyone present. Many of the workers felt deeply moved by the fact that their young master viewed them as people rather than merely servants. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. Unfortunately, they completely misunderstood his intentions. Instead of deciding to rest more, they became even more determined to work harder for him. Several immediately declared that they would continue producing as much soap as possible to make the young master richer. Watching them enthusiastically return to work, Michael could only shake his head. Clearly, they needed something enjoyable to do outside of work. As he sat on his bed, considering possible forms of entertainment, his thoughts wandered through the hobbies and leisure activities he remembered from his previous life. Then inspiration struck. Thinking back to the relaxing locations he often saw in anime and television, Michael suddenly realized the perfect project: hot springs. The next day, Michael immediately began working on his newest project, a hot spring. Compared to some of his previous inventions, the concept was relatively simple. He only needed a large pool and a heating system beneath it that could warm the water using firewood. Since there were no natural hot springs or nearby volcanoes, he decided to create an artificial version instead. After consulting ChatJK1, he selected a flat area near the river as the construction site. For the design, Michael drew inspiration from Roman bathhouses. He planned a system where heat and smoke would travel beneath the flooring, warming both the structure and the water above. Using boulder carve, he shaped large stones into pillars and floor sections. These pillars created open spaces beneath the bathhouse where heat could circulate. To connect everything together, he used stone mend, a spell that seamlessly fused stone materials as if they had always been one piece. The project was simply too large to hide. For the first time, the mansion staff openly witnessed Michael using magic. As green magical energy gathered around him, massive boulders began moving according to his will. The sight left the maids and butlers speechless. Many of them couldn't believe that a 5-year-old child was casually casting 2-star earth magic. Some of the younger maids initially failed to understand why everyone was so shocked. After all, talented children often began learning magic around that age. The older servants quickly pointed out the difference. No tutor had ever visited the estate. No one had ever seen Lilia teach him, yet Michael was using advanced spells as though he had practiced them for years. That realization stunned them even more. Everything he displayed appeared to be self-taught. The servants began discussing how extraordinary his talent truly was. Not only had he invented plumbing systems, soap, shampoo, and clocks, but he was also demonstrating magical ability that rivaled trained mages. What impressed them most was his endurance. After nearly an hour of continuous spellcasting, Michael barely appeared tired. To the workers, it seemed as though the Vanderbilt family had been blessed with a once-in-a-generation genius. What they still didn't know was that earth magic wasn't his only affinity. Several days later, construction was finally complete. The bathhouse featured a large pool divided into two sections, one for men and one for women. Compared to bathhouses from Michael's previous life, it was enormous, though it seemed relatively small compared to the scale of the Vanderbilt estate. At the end of the workday, Michael gathered the servants and brought them to the new facility. Even before entering, everyone could feel the warmth radiating from inside. When Beretta asked what he had created this time, Michael explained that it was a hot spring where people could relax in warm water after a long day of work. The idea immediately excited everyone. The prospect of soaking in hot water after finishing their daily duties sounded like a luxury beyond anything they had experienced before. After receiving instructions, the servants eagerly entered the bathhouse. Michael directed the butlers toward the men's side while the maids headed toward the women's section. He explained where to leave their clothes and how to wash before entering the baths. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then, as Michael prepared to head toward the men's bath, several maids suddenly stopped him. Confused, he asked what was wrong. The maids simply shook their heads. In their eyes, Michael wasn't an adult. He was still the adorable 5-year-old young master they had raised and cared for since infancy. Without giving him much choice, they insisted that he join them instead. Michael immediately became flustered. Most of the maids were around 20 years old, yet everyone still treated him like a small child. The maids cheerfully reminded him that they had bathed him when he was younger and saw nothing unusual about it. Despite his attempts to refuse, the group ignored his protests and dragged him toward the women's bath. As he was pulled away, Michael desperately tried to convince himself that everything was fine because he was technically only 5 years old now. Even ChatJK1 offered no response. The hot springs quickly became a massive success. Laughter, splashing, and excited conversations echoed throughout the bathhouse as the maids relaxed in the warm water. They were clearly enjoying themselves far more than Michael had expected. As for Michael, he stayed at the edge of the pool with his eyes covered by his hands. The maids repeatedly invited him to join them, but he stubbornly refused. To them, he simply looked like an embarrassed little boy. Their teasing only made things harder. While they chatted about their smooth skin and complimented one another, Michael used every ounce of willpower to remain seated and keep his eyes covered. Several hours later, everyone finally emerged from the baths wearing robes and looking completely refreshed. Their expressions made it seem as though they had discovered an entirely new way of living. At that moment, a butler arrived with a large barrel of milk that Michael had specifically requested. Following another custom he remembered, Michael showed everyone how to properly enjoy milk after a hot bath. Holding the drink with one hand and placing the other on their waist, they eagerly copied him. The reaction was immediate. The servants praised the experience non-stop. Many of them had been working since childhood and had never enjoyed anything so relaxing before. The hot springs, combined with proper hygiene and rest, left them feeling younger and more energetic than ever. Watching them enjoy themselves under the night sky filled Michael with satisfaction. He had already improved life inside the Vanderbilt estate, and he wanted to continue doing the same for everyone else in the future. The next morning, the clock bell rang to signal the start of the day. The workers woke up energized and immediately got to work. After their time in the hot springs, their efficiency skyrocketed. They cleaned the mansion, changed sheets, tended the gardens, and refilled the water system before noon had even arrived. With their regular chores completed, they returned to soap production, determined to help Michael succeed. After several more days of work, a large stockpile of soap and shampoo had finally been prepared. Crates filled the mansion, stacked with bars of soap and hundreds of bottles of shampoo. Castell volunteered to handle the deliveries. As the butlers loaded the products onto a carriage, she asked Michael an important question. If customers asked where the products came from, what should she tell them? The mansion's staff had deliberately kept Michael's invention secret, even from his parents. To maintain that secrecy, Michael decided the products needed a company name. After a moment of thought, he gave his answer. The products would be sold under the name Reborn. Castell immediately loved it, believing women would feel reborn after using the products. Michael simply went along with the explanation, keeping the true reason for the name to himself. Soon afterward, Castell traveled to Kingsbridge and personally delivered the first orders. The wealthy women, who had been waiting eagerly, opened opened their boxes and immediately tested the products. The fragrances lived up to every expectation. Many of them rushed to prepare baths right away so they could use the soap and shampoo without delay. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Several customers even paid more than expected and immediately asked whether future deliveries would be available. When they asked who deserved credit for the products, Castell carefully followed Michael's instructions. She revealed only the company name, Reborn. Over the following days, the products spread rapidly through Kingsbridge. The women who used them noticed softer skin, healthier hair, and a pleasant fragrance that lingered naturally. Their husbands noticed the difference as well, showering them with extra affection and attention. As those women proudly showed off the results, others quickly became jealous and wanted the same products for themselves. Before long, Reborn soap and Reborn shampoo became the newest luxury trend among the wealthy families of Kingsbridge, establishing the company as the premier brand everyone wanted to buy. The success of Reborn soap and Reborn shampoo quickly turned into a mountain of wealth for Michael. After calculating the numbers, he realized just how absurd the profits were. Producing a pair of soap and shampoo only cost a few hundred bronze coins, yet each pair sold for one full gold coin. The profit from a single sale was enormous. Each crate Castell delivered contained roughly 100 pairs, meaning every shipment generated around 100 gold coins. With multiple deliveries completed, Michael soon found himself staring at 1,000 gold coins spread across his bedroom. Curious, he asked ChatGK-1 to estimate their value in terms of US dollars from his previous world. After accounting for differences in purity and condition, the AI estimated that his fortune was worth roughly $10,000. The number surprised him. In his previous life, that amount of money would have been considered significant, and if the business continued at its current pace, he could potentially earn the equivalent of $40,000 every month. For someone who barely did any physical labor himself, it felt almost unfair. Still, Michael wasn't particularly excited by the money. Being born into the richest family in the world made wealth feel less important. Most of the things he wanted didn't even exist yet. Rather than purchasing luxuries, he was more interested in creating them himself. A few days later, Castell burst into his room early in the morning with excitement written all over her face. She informed him that Reborn products had become the talk of the town. Gossip among servants and noble households revolved almost entirely around the soap and shampoo. Michael listened calmly. Then an idea suddenly occurred to him. He had spent so much time thinking about improving daily life that he had almost forgotten something important. This wasn't just a medieval world. It was a world of magic. Immediately, he asked Castell to join him for a private conversation. Once they were alone, Michael asked if he could trust her completely. Offended that he would even question her loyalty, Castell assured him that she would never betray him. Satisfied, Michael revealed a secret. A small flame appeared on the tip of his finger. He casually explained that he could use magic. Rather than being shocked by the existence of magic itself, Castell was surprised by the element he displayed. Everyone in the mansion already suspected that Michael possessed earth magic due to the bathhouse construction. However, seeing him use fire magic as well was a completely different matter. She explained that dual element mastery was already considered exceptionally rare. Confused by her reaction, Michael decided to demonstrate further. A flame appeared on one finger. A small stone hovered on another. A sphere of water floated nearby. Then a gust of wind spun all three elements around his hand with remarkable precision. The display nearly caused Castell to collapse. She stared at him in complete disbelief. 4 elements. What Michael considered normal was, in fact, something almost impossible. Castell could no longer describe him as merely a genius. Realizing how extraordinary his abilities truly were, she immediately advised him to keep the truth hidden. Publicly displaying earth magic could be explained through his mother's talent, but revealing mastery over all 4 major elements would attract far too much attention. Michael quickly agreed. After calming herself down with a cup of water, Castell finally remembered why they were having the conversation in the first place. Michael handed her a pouch containing 1,000 gold coins and explained what he wanted. He asked her to purchase every book she could find about mana, magic, spells, and magical theory. More specifically, he wanted materials that could teach him how to cast new spells. Castell looked at him in surprise before asking if he meant magic scrolls. When Michael admitted he had never heard of them, she explained that magic scrolls were the primary tools mages used to learn new spells, and according to her, they could be purchased at the local wizard tower. The mention of magic scrolls immediately immediately captured Michael's attention. Wanting to know more, he asked Castell about the magic tower. According to her, it was a towering spire where veteran mages and aspiring wizards gathered. While the upper floors were restricted, the first floor was open to the public and functioned as a marketplace where people could buy books, scrolls, and even hire mages. The description instantly sparked Michael's imagination. He pictured a grand fantasy tower filled with magical wonders. When he asked whether she had ever visited one, Castell admitted she had gone there once when she was younger. During that visit, she witnessed a mage publicly demonstrating spells, and the display had left a lasting impression on her. She even confessed that she would have wanted to become a mage herself if she had possessed the talent. That detail immediately caught Michael's attention. Public spell demonstrations meant opportunities. If veteran mages performed magic in front of him, one could analyze the spells and potentially allow him to learn them as well. As Castell continued explaining that the magic tower was managed by the Guild of Arcana, a nationwide organization responsible for maintaining peace between mages and ordinary people, Michael was already thinking about something else entirely. The possibility of seeing powerful magic firsthand was too tempting. He asked whether he could visit the magic tower himself. Castell immediately rejected the idea. As the youngest son of the Vanderbilt family, Michael's movements were anything but private. The moment he left the estate, word would spread. His parents would be informed immediately, and the servants responsible for allowing it would likely face severe consequences. Realizing she was right, Michael reluctantly dropped the idea. Still, Castell pointed out that once his parents discovered his magical talent, they would almost certainly bring him to the magic tower themselves. That possibility satisfied him. If he visited under the protection of the Vanderbilt name, mages would likely be eager to impress him. They would perform spells for a curious child, never realizing he was secretly studying every single one. The next day, Michael found himself restless. Ever since learning about the magic tower, he couldn't stop thinking about magic. Searching for something else to occupy his mind, he remembered one of his favorite hobbies from his previous life, chess. Unlike in his old world, where he mostly played online, he now had the opportunity to create a physical chess set himself. Without wasting time, he headed into the forest and found a suitable tree. Using the spell Splinter Wood, he carefully cut it down and began shaping the materials. Several hours later, he returned, carrying a wooden chessboard and a bag filled with carved pieces. By then, the workday had ended. Some servants were enjoying the hot springs, while several butlers relaxed nearby. Michael dropped the chessboard onto a table, instantly grabbing everyone's attention. Sitting down across from the board, he revealed the game and introduced it as an intellectual pastime for distinguished gentlemen. Then he raised the stakes. Anyone who could defeat him would receive 100 gold coins. The butlers immediately became interested. A veteran butler named Sebastian pushed the younger servants aside and confidently took the seat opposite Michael. Michael smiled and began explaining the rules. The butlers listened carefully as he described how each piece moved and how the objective was to capture the opposing king. The game sounded surprisingly simple. To them, it seemed easy enough. They had no idea what they were about to get themselves into. That's all for this video. We'll be back again with another one soon, so drop a like and do subscribe if you enjoyed it and want more of the same. While the maids relaxed at the hot springs, the butlers had gathered around a table, completely absorbed in something new. Michael was in the middle of it, calmly capturing pieces and cornering kings, while Sebastian sat across from him, hair messed up and mustache drooping from stress. Game after game, Sebastian kept losing. 20 defeats in a row. The other butlers cheered for Michael's win, amazed that their young master could outsmart the man who prided himself on his sharp mind. Michael wasn't even trying that hard. He'd been playing chess online for years and had reached a solid amateur level, so beating a bunch of butlers new to the game felt easy. In his head, his system voice offered to point out mistakes in his endgame play, but Michael brushed it off, joking that he wouldn't need help for 100 years. Then the system dropped a warning. Sebastian could actually beat him within 2 years since he was showing real talent. That stung Michael's pride a little, but he shrugged it off, made an excuse about bedtime, and left Sebastian begging for one more match. That night, Sebastian couldn't stop thinking about chess, even dreaming about the board, and still losing to Michael in his sleep. The next day, Michael made more chess sets so everyone could play. As soon as work ended, the butlers rushed to the tables, and the game spread through the mansion like a fever. Sebastian stayed ahead of the rest, undefeated against every other butler. But as they kept playing and teaching each other after every loss, their skill kept climbing. Even some of the maids got hooked, including Castell, who fell for the game's complexity almost instantly. Soon the mansion echoed with the clatter of chess pieces and occasional groans whenever someone blundered. Meanwhile, business was booming. A new shipment of Reborn soap and shampoo was ready for delivery, and demand had exploded after wealthy women showed off the products to their friends. Since the soap wasn't sold in normal markets yet, it had turned into a hot, exclusive item among the noble ladies, driving even more people to want it. Michael, already expecting this, had increased production ahead of time. Castell went out to deliver the crates herself. At one wealthy woman's home, the madame gushed over the scent and called herself lucky to get a set before her friends could. She invited Castell in for tea, hoping to use the connection to score more products for her social circle. Castell, sensing a good business opportunity, agreed. Over chamomile tea in the garden, the madame's husband, a bored aristocrat lounging nearby, remarked that having a guest was the most interesting thing to happen to him all day. Castell saw her chance. Turning to him, she asked if he'd be interested in playing a game called chess. Castell checkmated the aristocrat with her bishop, and instead of getting upset, the man was thrilled. He said the game was exhilarating, admitting he was already thinking several moves ahead. He asked if he could buy a chess set of his own so he could show it off to his friends. Castell hadn't planned any of this. She only carried her own board to pass time during carriage rides, but now she saw a new business opportunity forming and told him she'd arrange chessboards through her employer. That evening, she reported everything to Michael, who agreed without hesitation. She suggested pricing each set high, since Michael personally crafted every piece using skills the other staff didn't have. But Michael shut the idea down, explaining that if they priced it too high, cheaper knockoffs would flood the market and steal their customers. Chessboards were simple to make, so nothing stopped others from copying them. Instead, he wanted to sell at a low price, so people would buy directly from them rather than bother making their own. He was thinking in terms of branding, something this world didn't really have yet, believing it mattered more long-term than squeezing out maximum profit per item. Before moving on, Michael checked how much they'd earned from the soap and shampoo deliveries that day. Castell handed him a heavy pouch worth about 3,500 gold coins, equivalent to roughly $35,000, the most money he'd ever held even in his past life. Since he had no personal use for it, he gave the money back to Castell and told her to hire wood craftsmen or mages to start producing chess sets at scale. He also instructed her to market the game as Reborn Chess to tie it to their brand. The next day, Castell delivered 10 handmade chessboards to the aristocrat's estate, which was filled with his gentleman friends eager to see this new game. She was introduced as the one who taught him to play, drawing curious looks from the crowd. After laying out a board, she and the Sir played a demonstration match, while the guests watched intently, murmuring about strategy and adjusting their monocles in concentration. Castell won again with a clean checkmate, leaving the spectators stunned. Despite losing, the Sir was delighted, comparing the game to commanding an army and calling it the perfect mental challenge for men like them. Silence followed until one guest broke it by criticizing the Sir's final moves, sparking a heated debate among the group about what the better strategy would have been. The disagreement escalated quickly, with different men insisting they knew the right calls, and soon they were arguing over who would get to play next. Two of them ended up challenging each other to a match, just to settle who'd get the board first, agreeing instantly and setting up to play right there. With 9 more boards laid out, the gentleman dove straight into a full-blown chess frenzy. Winners mocked losers, losers got hungrier to improve, and the cycle of humiliation and triumph kept everyone hooked, all of it quietly fueling the Reborn company's growth. One guest stood out from the rest, a man in a dark robe covered in runes instead of a gentleman's suit. He approached Castell and asked if she could get him 100 more boards, hinting he'd eventually want 1,000. When she said 100 would take 2 days, he agreed and asked her to deliver them to the magic tower in town. Castell immediately realized he was a real mage, and he confirmed that his colleagues at the tower were going to love the game too, calling it perfect for sharpening a mage's mind. Before leaving, he asked the name of the game, and Castell told him, Reborn Chess. As the days passed, the Reborn name started dominating conversations across Kingsbridge. Women couldn't stop raving raving about the soap and shampoo, claiming it worked miracles, and demand skyrocketed to the point where rival soap manufacturers began losing customers fast. One frustrated soap boss demanded his employees figure out the formula, but they couldn't replicate the scent or lather no matter what they tried. Fed up, he stormed off to check on his factory, expecting his workers to be hard at work. Instead, he found them huddled around a chessboard, completely absorbed in a match. Annoyed at first, he ended up getting drawn into the game himself, asking what it was called. His own employees, still glued to the board, casually answered Reborn chess, and the irony was enough to make him pass out on the spot. Back at the mansion, Castell updated Michael on how much the business had exploded. Wealthy buyers were ordering soap and shampoo by the crate. Merchants wanted to resell it in other towns, and Reborn chess had become a hit with the Magic Tower, forcing her to hire about 50 craftsmen just to keep up with demand. Michael was stunned by how fast everything was growing, realizing their current production couldn't keep pace and that he'd need to expand his workforce significantly. When Castell mentioned that customers were so loyal to Reborn soap they couldn't go back to their old brands, Michael didn't share her excitement. Instead, he asked about the other soap companies and learned they were struggling badly. That troubled him. He explained that ruining other people's livelihoods wasn't the point of starting this business, since his goal was to make life better for everyone, not destroy families who depended on their old soap trade. Castell was moved by his answer, seeing a side of him that didn't fit the image of a ruthless businessman. When she asked what they should do instead, Michael had a simple solution: buy out the struggling soap companies rather than let them collapse, turning potential losers into part of his own growing empire. The rise of Reborn soap and shampoo came at a heavy cost for the rest of the industry. Rival soap businesses were being wiped out almost overnight, with no one left buying their products. One struggling soap business owner faced this firsthand when his own son begged him for a chessboard, only for him to admit that money was too tight to afford one. The boy stormed off in tears, and the father was left helpless, all his savings going toward keeping his workers paid during the crisis. Soon after, Castell arrived at his office, introducing herself as a representative of the Reborn company. The man was hostile at first, assuming she'd come to gloat or finish off his business. Instead, she handed him a piece of paper, ignored at first until she made him look. It was the actual formula for Reborn soap, offered to him freely by Michael, with no conditions attached. The man was stunned, suspecting a trick, but Castell assured him there wasn't one. When he asked why the Reborn company would hand over its biggest secret to a competitor, Castell explained that Michael didn't want enemies, only for everyone to live comfortably, even if that meant giving away trade secrets. She then asked about his average monthly earnings before Reborn soap took over, and he estimated around 100 gold. Castell responded by placing a heavy pouch of gold coins on his desk, revealing Reborn's real offer: 1,000 gold coins up front, plus a share of future profits if he joined the company and began producing Reborn products himself. She clarified that if he refused, he could still keep the formula and sell soap independently under a different name without interference. But she also reminded him that Reborn wasn't just about soap. Michael had plans for lotions, perfumes, and other products, along with the wildly successful chess game already spreading across town. Joining the company meant becoming part of that larger, fast-growing future instead of competing against it alone. Castell left him to think it over, promising to return later for his answer. Alone, the man sat with his head in his hands, wrestling with a decision that would shape his family's future. Just then, his son burst into the room, beaming as he carried a chessboard personally crafted by Michael and delivered by Castell as a gift. The boy hugged his father tightly, thanking him and telling him he loved him. Overwhelmed, the man's expression softened, tears building in his eyes. In that moment, he made up his mind. He was going to accept the Reborn company's offer. Every soap business Castell approached accepted the Reborn company's offer. With their combined infrastructure now under one banner, production skyrocketed by nearly 2,000%, letting them churn out thousands of soaps and shampoos daily. The products sold out almost instantly, and peddlers were already carrying them into neighboring towns. When Michael asked how much they'd earned, a maid hauled in a heavy wooden chest overflowing with gold coins. After covering all expenses, they'd netted about 15,000 gold gold coins, roughly $150,000, in a single day. Michael could barely process it, quietly admitting to himself that he was now rich. Over the next 2 months, Reborn's influence exploded across Kingsbridge. People were washing and bathing far more often thanks to their soap, which noticeably cut down on illness. Nearly everyone in town became a customer in some form. Women through the soap and shampoo, men through the chess game. Newspapers and gossip circles buzzed with theories about who was behind the mysterious company, guessing everything from a time-traveling wizard to a reclusive sage. Despite nearly bankrupting the local soap industry, no one held a grudge, since even the absorbed soap makers were now praising Reborn's generosity. The mystery only made the company more famous, and it was clear their reach would soon spread beyond Kingsbridge entirely. Meanwhile, the situation caught the attention of the most powerful company in the region. Late at night, a group of exhausted executives gathered for an emergency meeting, reviewing reports showing their own popularity had dropped by roughly 30% because of Reborn's rise. One younger, less experienced member questioned why a soap company was even a concern, but an older, bald executive explained the real threat. Reborn wasn't just popular for soap. Their chess game had already taken over as the region's new pastime, proving they could dominate any market they touched. If left unchecked, Reborn could keep stealing customers until it threatened their entire business. All eyes turned to the man seated at the head of the table, the true owner of the company, and clearly someone of higher status than the rest, based on his composed appearance. When asked what they should do, he calmly stated that they would do nothing. Another executive pushed back, reminding him that this could affect his claim to his father's inheritance. But the man, named Bart, said he had no interest in fighting for succession within the Vanderbilt company. This revealed that the biggest rival to Michael's Reborn company was being run by his own father. The Vanderbilt name had built its global reputation through this very business, originally founded by Michael's grandfather. To determine a worthy successor, the grandfather had split the company among his children, sending them to manage different regions and territories. Bart controlled the branches in Kingsbridge and its surrounding towns, while other relatives ran divisions abroad. But no matter where they operated, they were all bound by the same unspoken rule. Whoever grew their branch into the strongest power would ultimately inherit the entire Vanderbilt fortune. Bart left the emergency meeting completely drained and had to travel through the night to reach the guest house where he was staying. Back in his room, he found his wife, Lilia Vanderbilt, fresh out of the bath and glowing with the scent of Reborn soap and shampoo. She couldn't stop praising the product, and even Bart, despite being their biggest business rival, admitted he genuinely enjoyed Reborn chess. Lilia reassured him that the growing rivalry didn't bother her, and Bart confirmed he had no interest in fighting his siblings for the Vanderbilt inheritance, content with a comfortable, peaceful life instead. As they lay together, Lilia admitted how much she missed their son, having been away from him for nearly 4 months. The conversation soon turned serious. Since Bart wasn't pursuing the family inheritance, that meant Michael would eventually lose access to the vast wealth and businesses that came with it, as everything would pass to whichever sibling won the succession. This was the real reason Bart pushed himself so hard, sacrificing time with his family to build up enough personal savings to secure Michael's future, even without the full Vanderbilt fortune. Still, Lilia wanted more for their son, insisting he deserved the best simply for being a Vanderbilt. Bart explained that his father valued talent above bloodline, and the only way Michael could still receive a meaningful portion of the inheritance was by proving exceptional skill in swordsmanship, magic, or some other field. Lilia held on to hope that Michael might inherit her aptitude for earth magic, but Bart privately doubted it, knowing that even being a gifted 6-star mage wouldn't be enough. Michael would need to reach the extremely rare 7-star level, a feat few geniuses ever achieved. Their only real hope rested on his magical awakening at age 10, when his true potential would finally reveal itself. After 4.5 months away, the couple finally began their journey home. Lilia grew increasingly restless as their carriage approached the estate, eager to see Michael again. But as the mansion came into view, her excitement faded into unease. Something about the place felt different, though everything looked the same on the surface. Her suspicion grew when she spotted a strange stone structure by the side of the mansion, steaming heavily. Bart squinted and realized it was some kind of hot spring, though he had never ordered anything like it to be built. As they arrived, the maids and butlers lined up to greet them, but their lowered heads only deepened the couple's suspicion that something unusual had happened during their absence. The moment the carriage stopped, Lilia stepped out and ignored the formal greetings entirely, cutting straight to the only thing she cared about. She demanded to know where her son son was. Michael strolled out of the mansion to greet his parents like nothing was out of the ordinary, completely unbothered by their stern expressions. Bart wasted no time asking him to explain all the strange changes to the estate, so Michael took them both on a full tour. He started with the kitchen, now equipped with working plumbing and faucets delivering clean water. Then he showed off his newest invention, the toilet, demonstrating how it flushed waste straight into the river through connected pipes. He gave his parents a simple explanation of how the system worked, with everything running down from a water tank on the roof. Bart examined the faucets and toilet closely, realizing none of it relied on magic, just clever mechanical design. He was stunned, since even royal palaces still depended on mages or servants to haul water, and he immediately recognized how revolutionary this kind of plumbing could be if spread to homes everywhere. Amazed, Bart asked who had built it, hoping to meet the inventor. Michael simply admitted it was him. Before his father could fully process that, Michael decided to stop hiding his magic altogether. He picked up a piece of metal and shaped it using pure earth mana, glowing with a green aura as he bent the metal into a miniature house frame. Lilia immediately recognized the spell as a 2-star technique, and Bart was floored realizing his 5-year-old son had pulled it off. Lilia erupted with excitement, celebrating that Michael had inherited her magical talent, hugging him tightly while declaring him a prodigy. Bart, trying to stay composed despite his obvious pride, asked how Michael had learned magic. Lilia credited herself, since she used to carry him along while gathering mana as a baby. Michael played along, claiming he'd simply seen mages casting spells and copied them because he thought they looked cool. In reality, that meant he'd absorbed and understood real spell work before he could even talk, something both his parents found almost unbelievable, though they wrote it off as pure, innate genius rather than anything stranger. When Bart asked about the plumbing and toilet, Michael brushed it off by saying a voice in his head guided him, which his parents interpreted as his own subconscious brilliance, similar to a musical prodigy, creating melodies through instinct. Convinced their son was a rare, intuitive genius, both magically gifted and inventive beyond his years, Bart laughed with relief, admitting he'd been needlessly worried about Michael's future talent. Lilia squeezed her son's face affectionately, declaring him a genius outright. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of a bell ringing through the halls. Bart asked what it was, and Sebastian explained it signaled lunchtime, calling it the clock. Bart, unfamiliar with the term, simply echoed the word back in confusion. The mansion clock left Bart nearly speechless. The gears and pendulum inside looked more intricate than most magic theories he'd studied, and at first he didn't grasp why it mattered so much compared to something as practical as the faucet or toilet. But once Michael explained how the day was divided into 24 equal hours, with the clock ticking at a constant rate, everything clicked for him. Bart immediately understood the implications. As a businessman, he knew timekeeping was one of the industry's biggest headaches, since shipments between towns had no reliable way to track how long they'd take. Sundials and hourglasses were too inconsistent, but a clock would let everyone agree on exact travel times, something that could completely transform commerce. He tried to stay composed while praising Michael's work, reminding himself it wasn't right to ask his 5-year-old son for a personal clock. Michael, sensing his father's obvious excitement, offered to make one for him anyway, explaining he just needed more raw materials. Bart tried to downplay his eagerness, but his enthusiasm was obvious. Lilia teased him for pretending not to want one, then encouraged Michael to build the clock so she could watch him use his magic firsthand. Since the clock would take a few days to finish, Michael continued the tour and introduced his parents to the hot springs he'd built beside the mansion. The staff helped Bart and Lilia settle in separately, and Bart was amazed, comparing it to hot springs he'd seen overseas, impressed that Michael managed to recreate the experience without any volcano nearby. As he relaxed in the water, Bart felt his exhaustion melt away, partly from the springs themselves and partly from the reassurance that his son's brilliance would secure his future. He no longer doubted that Michael's grandfather would eventually see his potential and support him, since Michael's plumbing invention alone proved he could solve problems through simple, practical means accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy or magically gifted. While relaxing beside his father, Michael sensed Bart wanted to say something meaningful, but assumed he was just too young to understand it, so the moment passed quietly. Their peace was shattered when Lilia's voice echoed through the walls, furious after learning Michael had been bathing on the maid's side of the hot springs instead of with her. She stormed into the men's section, demanding he immediately switch to bathing with her instead and threatening to pinch his cheeks as punishment. Realizing he was cornered, Michael scrambled for a way out and quickly changed the subject by lifting his hand and conjuring water, stone, and fire together, spinning them in the air using wind magic to show off that he could control all 4 elements at once. Michael's little display of controlling all 4 elements at once immediately sent his parents into a frenzy. Bart and Lilia scrambled out of the hot springs and bombarded him with questions, unable to accept what they'd just witnessed. Even the world's current 9-star Grand Wizard hadn't shown this kind of ability at 5 years old, let alone a child with 0 formal training. They made him repeat simple spells like Water Ball, Ember, Rock Throw, and Wind Blow several times, and even then, they could barely believe it was real. To get a proper answer, they called in a 5-star wizard from the Magic Tower to formally assess Michael. The wizard arrived hours later, treating the request the same as countless other hopeful parents who'd asked him to evaluate their supposedly gifted children, most of whom turned out average. He raised his wand and cast an inspection spell to examine Michael's mana core, creating a milky white screen that would reveal his elemental affinities as glowing lights. The moment the spell activated, the wizard staggered back in shock. Michael, meanwhile, silently absorbed new information through his system, learning that the technique was a 4-star spell tied to light and dark mana, elements he realized he didn't currently possess. He also learned the proper term for the stones inside his body. They were called mana cores, and understood that gathering rarer mana types, like light and dark, would require special circumstances rather than natural exposure. Bart nervously pressed the wizard for what he saw. Struggling to speak, the wizard finally described 4 brilliant lights glowing from Michael's lower abdomen. A green light, a red light, a brown light, and a silver light, representing all 4 basic elements coexisting at once. What stunned him most wasn't just the coexistence of all 4 cores, but their size, each one as large as an orange, a scale normally seen only in mages who had trained for years into adulthood. Finding this in an untrained 5-year-old was beyond anything he'd ever encountered. The wizard admitted he wasn't qualified to properly evaluate talent on this level and urged the Vanderbilts to bring Michael to the Magic Tower immediately, offering to formally take him in as a student so he wouldn't waste his gift. Bart felt pride, knowing his son could become one of the most respected wizards in the world, someone even kings might have to respect. But the offer worried him too, since joining the Guild of Arcana meant Michael would dedicate his entire life to magical study, potentially drifting his loyalty away from the Vanderbilt family and toward the Mage Guild instead. While Bart wrestled with those concerns, Lilia had a much simpler priority. She asked the wizard directly whether Michael's earth element core was bigger than the others, desperate to know if her son leaned more toward her own specialty. The wizard, still reeling from everything else he'd just seen, had no idea how to answer her. Life at the Vanderbilt estate shifted completely after Michael revealed his magical talent. Every morning, Lilia began personally tutoring him in earth magic, determined to make it his strongest element, treating the whole thing like a competition only she could win. Michael didn't mind the early sessions, since he genuinely learned a lot, including how earth mana came from the natural cycle of life itself, plants absorbing sunlight, animals consuming plants, and the leftover energy converting into earth mana that was strongest to gather early in the day. Lilia also taught him proper meditation technique, explaining that purer gathered mana led to stronger magical output. She tried teaching him hands-on by embracing him and channeling mana as a guide, but quickly realized he barely needed the help, since he was already effortlessly pulling mana from all 4 elements into his cores, thanks to his AI assistant working quietly in the background, even while he slept. With nothing left to teach on gathering mana, Lilia moved on to demonstrating actual spells, starting with a 2-star technique called Stone Armor, which coated her body in a full suit of granite for protection. Before she could even finish showing it off, Michael instinctively replicated the exact same spell on his own body, forming matching stone armor without any real effort. Lilia felt a mix of pride and disbelief at how effortlessly he mirrored years of her own practice in mere seconds. She explained that stone armor, being earth-based, was strong against wind attacks, but weak against fire, since every element carried its own strengths and weaknesses. Michael wasn't satisfied with that limitation. He wanted a defense with no weaknesses at all, something that could protect him from everything. When he asked if a water-based version of the same armor existed, Lilia confirmed that similar armor spells existed for other elements too, just under different names. That gave Michael an idea. If he could learn multiple elemental armor spells, he could layer them come together and build a defense that covered every weakness. He asked his AI assistant to create a new spell combining stone armor's concept across different elements, but it responded that it didn't have enough information yet to do so. Michael figured his upcoming trip to the Magic Tower might give him access to more spells to study and work with. Excited at the thought of eventually learning water armor, Michael muttered his plan under his breath, forgetting how sharp his mother's hearing was when it came to magic. Lilia immediately turned on him, suspicious and possessive, questioning whether he was already thinking about learning spells outside of earth magic behind her back. Michael tried to laugh it off and slip away, but she grabbed him by the cuffs before he could escape. Between his morning magic lessons with Lilia, Michael spent his afternoons building the clock he promised his father. Having made one before, he managed to construct a smaller version this time, closer to a grandfather clock than the bulky original. When Bart finally heard it ticking, he lost all composure, gasping and swinging his head along with the pendulum like he was hypnotized. Michael found it hilarious seeing his usually serious, no-nonsense father acting so silly over something so simple. Bart admitted he still had no idea how Michael built it, but he was thrilled and planned to install it in his office right away. Lilia jokingly, though not really jokingly, reminded him that now he had no excuse for coming home late anymore. Bart, clearly inheriting the same instinct for dodging her scary questions that Michael had, quickly changed the subject by pointing out the time and rushing them to get moving toward Kingsbridge. It took about a week to finally make the trip, since Lilia insisted on squeezing in more earth magic training before Michael's official assessment. When they finally set off, Michael confirmed with his AI assistant that it was ready to analyze any new spells they might encounter at the Magic Tower, and it confirmed it could scan any magic performed nearby. After hours of travel, Sebastian announced their arrival at Kingsbridge. Michael already knew a bit about the city from Castell's reports, since it was home to wealthy merchants, renowned sword families, and even royalty, which was exactly why Reborn products could be sold there at such high prices. Seeing it in person, he noticed the towering stone walls, roughly 6 stories high, guarded by soldiers in gleaming armor, thanks to the Vanderbilt emblem on their carriage, showing 2 hands cupping gold coins over an image of the planet. They were let through without question, with the guards even bowing in respect. As they rode deeper into the city, Michael took in the sights of a real medieval world. Men in fine tunics and women in elaborate gowns, dressed as if it were completely ordinary. It was surreal seeing something he'd only known from anime and shows now playing out in front of him in real life. That fascination was cut short when a horrible smell hit him as they crossed a bridge. His parents didn't seem to notice anything unusual, confused by his reaction, until Bart realized this was Michael's first time in Kingsbridge and explained that the smell was coming from the River Dames. Looking out, Michael saw exactly why. The river was filled with pollution, and not just ordinary waste, but raw human sewage dumped straight into the water. Having grown used to his own modern plumbing back at the mansion, he'd genuinely forgotten this world was still stuck in medieval sanitation, and the reality of it hit him all at once. Confused about why such a wealthy city would tolerate such a horrible smell, Michael asked why no one cleaned it. Bart explained that magicians actually purified the River Dames every week, and it had just been cleaned the day before. That answer shocked Michael even more, since the river was already filthy again so soon after. The locals, however, walked past without reacting at all, completely used to the stench. In his head, Michael recognized the real issue. This world was treating the symptom instead of the cause, relying on magic to mask a problem that a proper sewage system could actually fix. His AI assistant offered to explain how one could be built using materials available in this world, but Michael set the idea aside for now, doubting the city's powerful families would let him overhaul something so large. Soon they arrived at the Magic Tower, a massive obsidian-like spire with a shimmering green portal serving as its entrance. Sebastian informed them the Tower Master had already been alerted of their arrival. Michael stepped out, eager to see real magic in action, and after a short wait, a mage in a green robe and pointed hat emerged to greet them. When Lilia asked to see the Tower Master, the woman apologized, explaining he was away on business, but would return within the hour. She then addressed Lilia with clear admiration, calling her the Earthen Witch of the West, and revealing that Lilia had once been talented enough to potentially become the next Tower Master herself before stepping away from that path. Lilia brushed off the praise, insisting she didn't need need the magic tower's help, since she could personally teach Michael everything about earth magic. Bart, embarrassed by her bluntness, asked if they should return later, but the woman offered a better solution. Michael could tour the tower while they waited. Michael jumped at the chance, and his parents, busy with Vanderbilt business for the day, left him in the woman's care. As they walked, she asked why he wanted to visit, assuming it was simple curiosity about starting his magical training. Michael admitted the real reason was that he was there to get his talent formally assessed. She assumed this meant confirming his earth magic aptitude, given his mother's background, and Michael simply agreed, saying that was what people had told him so far. As they approached the tower, Michael felt an overwhelming, dense concentration of mana in the air, unlike anything he'd sensed before. He noted aloud that the elemental balance felt off, with far more fire mana than water. The woman was startled, since sensing multiple elements shouldn't have been possible for someone supposedly gifted only in earth magic. Michael casually replied that he was talented in all of them, leaving her frozen in shock. As he continued walking toward the portal inside the tower, he sensed something new entering his awareness. His system alerted him that it had detected unfamiliar mana nearby, and after analyzing it, confirmed that he had now gained the ability to gather 4 brand new types: light, dark, lightning, and poison. Michael's system immediately got to work, forming new cores to hold the freshly discovered mana types, and automatic gathering kicked in right away. He closed his eyes and breathed in the abundant mana flooding out of the magic tower, feeling tiny new crystals form around his main elemental cores. Lightning mana felt like a prickling sensation on his skin, while poison mana gave him something like heartburn, but both discomforts faded quickly as the mana absorbed into his growing crystals. Meanwhile, the woman finally processed what Michael had told her and reacted with total shock, realizing this was why the Tower Master himself had personally taken time to handle the assessment. Quadruple mastery mages existed only in old legends, and seeing an ordinary-looking 5-year-old boy carry that kind of talent left her stunned. She told Michael to make himself comfortable while she rushed off to find the Tower Master immediately, pulling out a broomstick and flying away, leaving him alone in the tower without a second thought. Michael didn't mind being left behind. If anything, it gave him the freedom to explore and study spells at his own pace. Stepping through the portal, he found the inside of the tower far larger than it appeared from outside, filled with moving oil paintings, floating staircases leading nowhere, mages walking upside down on the ceiling, dancing candles, chasing each other through the air, and talking books, doors, and pillars that reacted to his presence. He spent a good 10 minutes simply marveling at the surreal environment, amazed at how closely it resembled the magic towers he remembered from stories in his old world. Continuing to explore, he expected to find mages performing dazzling displays of magic for public viewing, since he recalled Castell mentioning the first floor was meant for exactly that kind of spectacle. But no matter where he looked, there were no spells being cast, and no mages putting on any kind of show. His assistant informed him that no mana usage could be detected nearby, but pointed him towards signs of human activity down a certain hallway. Following the directions, Michael heard loud banging sounds, growing louder as he approached a large circular library filled with towering bookshelves. Instead of quiet studying, the room was packed with people crowding around the railings, murmuring excitedly about missed opportunities and tight competition. Squeezing through the crowd to see what was happening, Michael looked down to find roughly 100 tables spread across the lower floor, each holding a chessboard mid-game, pieces scattered everywhere from ongoing matches. It turned out the entire magic tower wasn't showcasing spells at all, because everyone, mages included, was completely absorbed in playing Reborn chess. Michael didn't know whether to feel proud that his game had spread this far, or disappointed that it was now the reason he couldn't find anyone willing to demonstrate magic for him to study. Michael headed down to the tables full of serious mages, determined not to leave empty-handed after such a long trip. He hadn't come all this way just to watch chess matches. When one game ended with a mage triumphantly declaring checkmate, Michael approached the winner and asked why the mages weren't performing spells for the crowd like he expected. The bespectacled mage explained that spellcasting demonstrations had become pointless, since ordinary people couldn't appreciate the difference between a simple one-star trick and a genuinely advanced 5-star spell. Chess tournaments, on the other hand, let everyone clearly see who was actually actually the smartest, since spectators could follow the game and understand skill differences for themselves. Michael, realizing his own invention was the reason he couldn't find any spellcasting to study, sat down completely disheartened by the irony of it all. Refusing to give up, he came up with a new plan. He reorganized the scattered chess pieces perfectly, catching the mage's attention since even the queen ended up in the correct spot, something most beginners got wrong. Then Michael pulled out a pouch of gold coins and proposed a bet. If the mage won, Michael would hand over 100 gold coins. But if Michael won, the mage had to perform a magic spell for him. The mage, tempted by easy money and assuming beating a 5-year-old would be simple, agreed with no takebacks. The match ended in Michael's total domination, using only a knight and rook to dismantle his opponent's pieces before delivering checkmate. The mage was stunned to lose to a child, but his frustration quickly turned into genuine curiosity about the strategy behind Michael's moves. He peppered Michael with questions about specific decisions, especially why Michael avoided taking his queen at one point, a move that ended up costing him the game. Michael explained the value of sacrificing pieces for better positioning, sharing lessons drawn from his experience playing chess in his previous world. By the end, the mage no longer saw him as just a kid. Remembering their deal, Michael reminded him about the spell. The mage, now genuinely grateful for what he'd learned, decided against giving Michael a throwaway trick and instead demonstrated a 3-star spell called Cloud of Daggers, conjuring violet mystic daggers that spun rapidly around his body as a defensive barrier. Michael's system automatically analyzed and recorded the spell's details, noting its fire and dark elemental nature and its usefulness as protection for someone who preferred not to fight directly. Michael thanked him, satisfied with the new addition to his growing collection of spells. Just then, another mage walked over, having just finished his own match, and got curious about the chessboard between them. After hearing what had happened, he turned to Michael with the same tempting proposition already in mind, asking if the deal was still 100 gold coins for a win. Michael smiled deviously, more than ready to repeat the exact same scheme all over again. The scruffy mage lost just as badly, stunned that a 5-year-old had beaten him in only a few moves. Feeling a bit guilty, Michael walked him through his mistakes, replaying the match and showing exactly where he went wrong and what could have prevented the loss. The mage was floored by how many moves ahead Michael had been thinking, and out of genuine respect, he removed his hat and honored their deal, casting a 4-star spell called Mystic Crow Summon. He conjured a spectral crow made of violet energy that he could see through completely, letting the caster observe everything the crow saw. Michael's system logged the spell instantly, recognizing it as a useful scouting tool alongside the defensive cloud of daggers he'd just learned. Word spread quickly, and more mages lined up eager to challenge him, not just for the chance to win, but for the free coaching that came after every loss. Michael agreed to keep playing as long as each opponent showed him a spell in return. One by one, he dismantled inexperienced mage after mage, exploiting basic chess traps that were common knowledge back in his old world, but completely unknown here. Even one of the tournament's top contenders stepped up to test him and ended up losing too, though it took a bit more effort. Michael's reputation exploded through the magic tower as his system kept logging spell after spell from each defeated opponent. Eventually, the crowd around his table grew so large that mages began arguing over whose turn was next, some wanting to win, others just wanting to learn from him. With too many mediocre spells being offered, Michael raised the stakes, announcing he'd only play whoever brought the most interesting spell to the table. This sent the crowd into a frenzy, with mages shouting out their most impressive techniques, from creating illusionary clones to summoning meteors to riding on floating clouds. Amid the chaos, a calm, aged voice cut through everyone else, offering to show Michael something far beyond the rest, an 8-star spell called Draconic Blaze. The moment the mages heard this, the room fell completely silent, and they parted respectfully as the mysterious figure calmly approached Michael's table. By now, word had spread far beyond the library, drawing a huge crowd to the second floor of the magic tower, all eager to witness the young prodigy dominating mage after mage at chess. When the old man approached the table, onlookers were confused why the other competitive mages stepped aside so respectfully for someone who hadn't even joined the earlier tournament. Their confusion turned to shock when one spectator recognized him by his long white beard and pointed hat. He was the tower master himself, an 8-star wizard, rarely seen outside his tower. Michael realized the man hadn't been joking earlier about knowing an 8-star spell. The tower master sat down and offered the same deal as everyone else. If Michael won, he'd perform one of his best spells. But when Michael asked what would happen if he lost, the tower master revealed a far bigger stake. Michael Michael would become his personal apprentice. The crowd erupted in disbelief, since apprenticeship under the legendary Tranquil Blazing King of Fire was an honor most prodigies never even qualified for. No one recognized Michael's name, and it baffled them that a child from the business-focused Vanderbilt family could possibly be talented enough to earn such an offer. Michael hesitated, not wanting to be bound to the magic tower for life, but when the tower master teased that he might be scared of losing, Michael's pride kicked in, and he accepted, making the first move. The match unfolded unlike any other that day. For the first time, Michael faced someone who played with the depth and mastery of a true grandmaster, forcing him to slow down and think carefully with every move. The crowd watched in tense silence as the two exchanged captures, whittling their pieces down to just pawns, a bishop, and their kings. Spectators debated who had the advantage, with most assuming the Tower Master's experience would win out. The tension peaked when Michael's last bishop got cornered by two pawns, leaving him with a rough choice: sacrifice the bishop or expose his king. Michael's system offered to reveal a checkmate sequence, but he declined, confident in what he'd learned from studying high-level chess in his old world. When it came time to move, Michael reached for a pawn on the opposite side of the board, an unexpected choice that stunned the crowd, who assumed the young prodigy had finally slipped up. But the sharper chess minds in the audience quickly recognized the brilliance hidden in that move, and so did the Tower Master, whose confident expression faded into a frown as the implications sank in. Moments later, his frown broke into laughter as he accepted the outcome, admitting out loud that he had lost the game. Realizing there was no way to avoid checkmate, the Tower Master chose to surrender gracefully. He'd heard stories from his former student, Lilia, about her son creating running water, building an accurate clock, and even constructing a hot spring, all without magic, but he dismissed them as a proud mother's exaggerations. Watching Michael in person completely changed his mind. The Tower Master himself had become deeply obsessed with Reborn chess ever since it appeared, spending so much time playing that rumors spread he'd become a hermit locked away in his room. In truth, he'd simply been competing against other high-level intellectuals, confident he was the best player around, until Michael proved otherwise. Initially, he wanted Michael as his apprentice purely for the chance to have a worthy chess opponent. But watching him closely, he noticed something far more significant. Mana particles were being drawn toward Michael naturally, almost as if the universe itself favored him, keeping him in a constant state of passive meditation and growth. It had taken the Tower Master 2 decades to master that kind of technique, yet Michael did it effortlessly at 5 years old. Despite wanting to personally guide Michael toward the peak of magic, the Tower Master reconsidered. Since magic came so naturally to Michael, formal teaching might actually hinder him rather than help, especially since the Tower Master himself remained permanently stuck at the 8-star level with no path forward. He decided it was best to let Michael grow on his own, the same way past legendary heroes reportedly reached the mythical 9-star realm. He introduced himself properly as Cerberus Augendor, the 10th Tower Master of Kingsbridge. Michael introduced himself in turn as Michael Von Vanderbilt, and the crowd immediately erupted in shock upon hearing the Vanderbilt name, stunned that the family known only for business had produced a magical prodigy. To escape the noise, Cerberus snapped his fingers and instantly teleported them both to his private chambers, a feat Michael's system identified as an extremely rare 7-star spell called translocation, allowing travel to any previously visited location. Michael found himself in a massive dome-like sanctuary at the top of the tower, filled with floating magic circles and objects drifting without gravity, more like an observatory than a living space. At the center of the room floated a glowing network of interconnected light points, which Cerberus explained was the magic tower's entire accumulated library of knowledge, every spell and scroll ever collected. Cerberus then offered Michael something greater than the promised spell demonstration: full access to this library, so he could study everything from basic 1-star spells to advanced 8-star techniques whenever he returned. As Michael considered the offer, an impulsive idea overtook him, and before he could stop himself, he reached out and touched one of the floating points. Instantly, the entire library's information began pouring directly into his mind. His system flagged a dangerous overload of incoming data and triggered an emergency shutdown to protect him, and Michael's vision went dark as his body collapsed to the floor. Michael woke up feeling like his chest was being crushed, only to realize it wasn't a medical emergency, but his mother crushing him in a desperate desperate hug. Lilia had been sobbing over him, and the moment his eyes opened, she nearly suffocated him with relief. She immediately turned her anger on Cerberus, blaming him for letting her son collapse while under his watch and declaring they'd never return to the magic tower again. Bart tried to calm her down, reminding her she was speaking to a tower master, but Cerberus simply admitted fault, apologizing since he'd never seen anyone react this way to touching the magic library before. Michael himself had no memory of what happened after his body overheated and his head felt like it was about to burst. Reaching out to his AI assistant for answers, he was surprised when it addressed him by name for the first time, something it had never done before. It explained that touching the magic library had triggered a download of information far beyond what his young brain could handle, forcing an emergency shutdown to protect him. During that unconscious period, the assistant used the library's contents to upgrade itself entirely, introducing itself as ChatJK2, now equipped with deep knowledge of magic drawn from the Kingsbridge Magic Tower's full 893 years of accumulated history. Curious what this meant, Michael asked what his new assistant could do with all that knowledge, and it offered to compile his magical abilities into a clear system for him to view. A translucent display appeared before him, listing his stats. Magic talent rated SSS+ class. Element mastery marked as not applicable. Magic purity at 99.99%. Mana quantity also not applicable, and his current realm listed as a 2-star novice magician. Confused by the blank entries, Michael learned that standard methods for measuring mastery and mana quantity simply didn't apply to him, since no existing system accounted for a mage gifted in every element simultaneously. He brushed this off as another gift from being reincarnated, unaware of just how extraordinary that fact actually was. His assistant further explained that his current mana-gathering method was built specifically for earth mana and wasn't suited for his other elements, and while the magic library contained separate techniques for each element, using them all individually would be wildly inefficient. To solve this, the system revealed it had created something entirely new during the upgrade, a supreme skill called unity gathering. This skill would let him absorb any and all mana from his surroundings without needing to store it inside his cores first, effectively giving him a virtually limitless mana pool. It also granted him a unique awareness of mana in his environment, letting him sense and draw from it freely, with no spell or barrier able to hide mana from him, whether it existed openly in the world or was sealed inside a container. The sheer scale of what this skill meant hit Michael all at once, leaving him stunned by the power now at his fingertips. Michael quickly realized the true scope of his new ability, asking his AI assistant whether unity gathering meant he could control mana that wasn't even his own. ChatJK2 confirmed it, explaining that his level of control depended on how his own mastery compared to the original casters. Michael understood immediately how broken this made him, since he could theoretically disrupt any spell cast near him or even turn it back on the caster. Curious about the assistant's new limits, Michael asked if it could now create any spell he imagined. ChatJK2 clarified that spell synthesis was currently capped at 3-star level, since the magic library's knowledge, while vast, still had gaps. Creating anything more powerful would require another software update, fueled by gathering more magical knowledge from other sources. A progress bar appeared, showing 0% toward the next upgrade, essentially nudging Michael to seek out more knowledge in the future, something he was more than motivated to do, given how much stronger this update had already made him. Lilia noticed Michael staring blankly and worried something was wrong again, but he snapped back to the present just as he realized he could now see mana with total clarity, appearing as tiny, wiggling strings filling the room, almost as if the mana itself were curiously watching him back. Looking at his mother, a detailed magical profile appeared before his eyes, revealing her title as the Earthen Witch of the West, her S-class talent, Earth Mastery, 90% magic purity, a mana quantity of 91,493, and her rank as a 7-star expert mage. Realizing how useful this new sensing ability was, Michael quickly composed himself and assured his mother he was fine, just gathering his thoughts. Bart, still worried, asked Cerberus if there was any way to guarantee this kind of collapse wouldn't happen again. The Tower Master admitted he didn't fully understand why it occurred, but confirmed he'd monitored Michael the entire time and found no lasting damage, comparing his unconscious state to simple sleep. Relieved, but still cautious, Bart pressed for a solution. Cerberus explained that Michael's magical talents had emerged far earlier than normal, creating an imbalance in his young body, and suggested he focus on strengthening his physical condition first. He then produced an old worn book containing an earth magic technique designed to harden the body using earth mana, making it as tough as solid stone without needing to actively cast any spell. He explained that the technique was progressive, starting at 1 star but capable of reaching all the way to 9 star mastery with enough practice, though it had fallen out of common use since faster defensive spells had since replaced it. Still, Cerberus noted that Michael only needed to reach its second level to build sufficient physical resilience. Lilia took the book eagerly, already planning to personally guide Michael through the training the moment they returned home, determined to make sure nothing like this ever happened to her son again. Michael's family headed home right after wrapping up business at the Magic Tower, with Lilia refusing to let him stay any longer out of fear he'd collapse again. Before leaving, Cerberus officially certified Michael's talent, recording him as a rare quadruple element mage. Back home, Michael examined the old book Cerberus had given him and asked his AI assistant to read through it. Within minutes, it absorbed the entire technique, revealing the spell as internal earth defense, a passive, always active ability that hardened the user's skin and organs to mineral-level toughness. It offered strong protection against air-based attacks, but nothing beyond that, and its major drawback was the amount of time needed to cultivate it, time most mages preferred spending on strengthening their mana cores instead. Michael liked the concept of passive defense, but wanted something broader, protection against every element, rather than just one. When he asked if his assistant could create similar spells for other elements, it explained that maintaining multiple defensive techniques at once would be inefficient, and instead offered to synthesize an entirely new skill. This led Michael to ask about the difference between a spell and a skill, and he learned that spells were something any mage could learn through proper theory and mana, while skills were natural talents unique to the individual that couldn't be taught. Excited by the idea of something uniquely his, Michael agreed, and his assistant synthesized a brand new skill called Absolute Unity Defense. Unlike the original Earth-based spell, this skill offered passive protection against any and every type of magic, as long as the incoming attack wasn't a higher star rating than his own defense. Even better, cultivating it wouldn't interfere with the growth of his mana cores at all, and it had the potential to eventually reach a 9-star rating, meaning it could one day make him nearly untouchable, regardless of what kind of magic was thrown at him. With his personal status now updated, Michael saw his profile reflecting the addition of this new skill alongside his growing list of learned spells, with more clearly expected to come as he continued advancing. Back at the mansion, Lilia kept Michael from leaving the estate for a long while, still shaken by his collapse at the Magic Tower. She personally supervised his physical training, guiding him through the internal earth defense technique Cerberus had given him, unaware that Michael was quietly focusing his real effort on strengthening his absolute unity defense instead. Every day, he pushed through 100 push-ups, ran a 2-kilometer loop around the estate, and completed 100 crunches, all while continuously gathering mana to build his body from the inside out. Time passed steadily under this routine, until finally, 5 years had gone by. 5 years had passed, and Michael was no longer the skinny little boy he used to be. At 10 years old, his body had filled out from years of consistent physical training, leaving him fitter than he'd ever been, even in his previous life. Ignoring the maid Beretta's warning to bring an umbrella for the rain outside, Michael walked out completely unaffected, protected by an invisible prismatic barrier that kept every drop from touching him. His absolute unity defense had reached 4-star level, making him immune to any spell at or below that rank. And since rain counted as a naturally weak water-based spell, it simply couldn't touch him. His mana cores had also grown to match a 4-star mage, though his progress was slowed by how difficult it was to gather rarer elements like lightning and poison, something he still relied on Cerberus to help supply through mana stones. Cerberus, meanwhile, had become a regular visitor to the Vanderbilt estate, technically checking on Michael's magical progress, but really just showing up for a chance to play Reborn chess. Matches he always lost. Interestingly, the Tower Master wasn't even the second-best chess player in the household, since that title belonged to Sebastian, who had come close to beating Michael several times over the years. Magic wasn't Michael's only focus during this time. The Reborn company kept growing steadily, expanding into other cities and Korean villages, with earnings piling up faster than Michael cared to track, most of it reinvested straight back into the business. Castell continued hiring craftsmen, blacksmiths, and mages to widen their production, while Michael kept inventing new products to maintain their momentum. One of these was the matchstick, originally meant only to help the maids start fires during winter, but once Castell saw its potential, she convinced him to sell it commercially. Despite its low price, the matchstick became hugely popular, especially among people in smaller villages who couldn't afford fire mages, helping spread Reborn's reputation far beyond Kingsbridge. He also introduced the compass and eyeglasses, both practical inventions that boosted the company's profits and public image. One of his biggest undertakings was the bicycle, which he unveiled to the whole estate, leading to plenty of falls and scraped elbows, but plenty of laughter too. Bart instantly wanted to use one for his daily trips to Kingsbridge, though Lilia and the maids quickly vetoed that idea out of safety concerns. Still, the bicycles proved genuinely useful for the staff who had to move constantly across the massive estate grounds. Most of these inventions came together easily with his assistant's help and his growing collection of 2 to 3 star spells, as long as they didn't require an external power source. But that limitation finally broke after 5 years of relentless trial and error as Michael completed a working prototype of an engine, a project demanding painstakingly precise materials that could withstand immense pressure. With the final piece locking into place, all that remained was fuel, and Michael would finally be able to harness electricity. Michael headed to his parents' room, hoping to ask where he could buy petroleum oil for his engine project, but the moment he walked in, he sensed he'd interrupted something serious. Bart reassured him it was fine, since they'd actually been about to call for him anyway. Lilia pulled Michael onto the bed and gently explained that turning 10 years old wasn't just an ordinary birthday. It marked the arrival of something called a talent awakening, a milestone that could shape his entire future. She described talent as an inborn aptitude everyone carried, something a person excelled at whether they realized it or not, and explained that awakening it would grant new, personal spells tied directly to that talent. She gave an example of someone who awakened a talent called magma technician and gained a skill letting them live safely inside a volcano. Michael listened closely, realizing this matched almost exactly what his AI assistant had told him 5 years earlier about the difference between spells and skills, meaning skills were tied to a person's awakened talent rather than something arbitrary his system had invented. Lilia, misreading his serious expression as worry, tried to comfort him by predicting he'd surely awaken a talent connected to his rare quadruple mastery, possibly even something powerful enough to be called a supreme skill. Bart quickly cautioned her against building up expectations, pointing out that no supreme skill had appeared in their country in over 100 years. Lilia insisted her son was talented enough to defy the odds, while Bart gently reminded Michael that they'd love him no matter what talent he ended up with. Michael, still processing everything, awkwardly asked what exactly a supreme skill even was. Bart explained that it was an extraordinarily rare power capable of reshaping reality itself, with only about 10 known to exist in the entire world, each wielded by beings of immense influence. He cited examples like the King of the Seas commanding the oceans and the Draconic Empress ruling her race, both because of their own supreme skills, and warned Michael not to be discouraged if he didn't receive one, since such power was too dangerous to be granted freely. Hearing this left Michael stunned, since he already possessed a supreme skill, Unity Gathering, granted to him years earlier through his AI assistant's software upgrade. He hadn't realized just how monumental that gift truly was until now. With no point in speculating further, Lilia decided they should head to Kingsbridge immediately to visit the church for his awakening. As they prepared to leave, Michael quietly asked his assistant what to expect from his upcoming talent awakening, but it admitted it didn't have enough information on the subject. It did offer one reassurance, though, that if Michael received a talent, gaining another supreme skill wasn't out of the question. Michael countered that this seemed unlikely, since his parents made clear how exceedingly rare supreme skills were, and he'd already used up what felt like an impossible stroke of luck once already. His assistant had no response. After 5 years without leaving the estate, Michael finally set off with his parents toward Kingsbridge for his talent awakening. Since it was winter, he kept the carriage and their horse warm, using simple ember spells along the way. When they arrived, the city was blanketed in snow, but their carriage was let through without issue as always. Looking out the window, Michael saw just how deeply Reborn had embedded itself into everyday life. People everywhere carried matchboxes to warm their homes and light fires. Children pretended to be mages while striking striking matches, and one mother wearing cheap Reborn eyeglasses proudly watched her son declare he'd study Reborn chess to get smart enough for the magic tower. That same mother, thanks to the eyeglasses restoring her ability to read, had landed a job as a bank clerk, no longer struggling to afford food and even having enough left over to buy her son a chess set. Michael felt real satisfaction, seeing how his inventions had genuinely improved people's lives, especially since a simple 2-0 copper matchstick spared families from having to hire expensive fire mages just to stay warm. But not everything was cheerful. He noticed a growing number of people coughing, sneezing, and looking sickly along the streets. When he asked what was happening, Lilia quickly pulled him back into the carriage, explaining that a disease was spreading through the city and warning him to stay hidden since they were there specifically for his awakening. Bart added that this happened often in winter, since there weren't enough healing mages to keep up with demand. As the familiar stench of the river dames drifted into the carriage, Michael suspected the ongoing river pollution was likely fueling the outbreak, and reconsidered the sewer system idea he dismissed as too large a project back when he was 5. They eventually arrived at the church, an elaborate cathedral-like structure that stood completely empty and silent. A bald priest greeted the Vanderbilts warmly, expressing confidence that a boy as gifted as Michael would surely awaken a strong skill, which delighted Lilia. Michael, meanwhile, was more curious about the towering statue of a holy maiden at the center of the church, and the priest confirmed she represented the world's supreme goddess, the very being who created everything, and who would briefly connect with Michael during the ritual. Guided to the altar, Michael was told he'd feel himself falling asleep and shouldn't resist it. The priest began the ritual, channeling divine power as blinding light erupted from the statue. Michael briefly reached out to his AI assistant, only to get a joking response, claiming he'd died before he opened his eyes somewhere entirely different. A dreamlike realm made of solid, floating clouds resembling heaven itself. Standing before him was an enormous feminine face filling the sky, confirming she was God. She teased Michael for seemingly forgetting her after only 10 years, clearly displeased he didn't immediately recognize her. Michael, staring up at her, found himself surprised, since he didn't remember God looking quite this beautiful. The goddess pouted at Michael for not recognizing her, and he apologized, explaining he'd only been a formless soul when they first met. She forgave him easily, admitting she found his time in this world genuinely entertaining. When Michael worried he was essentially cheating by accelerating technology far beyond what this world would naturally develop, she laughed it off, revealing that her people had grown so dependent on magic that real technological progress had stagnated for thousands of years, something she found deeply frustrating to watch. Michael sensed this was likely the true reason he'd been reincarnated in the first place. She showed him visions of the impact he'd made, from women enjoying Reborn soap to crowds gathered around chessboards, and even his own parents embracing as they watched over his motionless body during the ritual. Back home, even someone like Beretta no longer suffered from the strain of hauling water by hand. Michael simply said he wanted everyone to feel as comfortable as he did, and the goddess told him that desire was exactly why she'd given him his power in the first place. She then reminded him that regardless of already having a supreme skill, he still needed to go through his official talent awakening, and she intended to grant him one whether he wanted it or not. She explained that spreading his inventions across the world wouldn't be easy given competition and deeply rooted cultural resistance. So to help him and his allies rise to the top of their fields, she bestowed upon him a new talent, Harbinger of the Future. Along with it came a second supreme skill, Gift Bestowal. Michael's system updated to reflect these changes, now showing his talent alongside his original supreme skill, Unity Gathering, plus this new one. He was stunned, since supposedly only 10 people in the world possessed even one supreme skill, and he now had 2. When he asked what Gift Bestowal actually did, the goddess kept it vague, only revealing that it let him awaken hidden talents in other beings and grant them powers otherwise impossible to obtain, insisting she didn't want to spoil the surprise. As his body began fading from the dream realm, signaling his return to the real world, Michael thanked her sincerely for the life she'd given him. She casually brushed it off, then dropped an urgent warning just before he vanished completely. He needed to get his family out of Kingsbridge soon, since a plague was coming. She confirmed his suspicion that the pollution in the River Dames would only worsen and eventually cause mass deaths across the city. Michael resisted the pull of the fading sensation long enough to process this, realizing his father father worked in Kingsbridge. Cerberus and his mage friends lived there, and his Reborn company had just begun establishing itself in the city. He refused to let such a disaster unfold if there was anything he could do to stop it. The goddess, amused, told him this meant he'd finally have to build that sewer system he'd been putting off, wishing him luck before sending his soul back to his body. Michael awoke, with fierce determination burning in his eyes. That's all for this video. We'll be back again with another one soon, so drop a like and do subscribe if you enjoyed it and want more of the same.